Chapter 1860. If the great accomplishment is lacking, there is no harm in it. Large like a rush, its uses are endless. Heaven and earth are merciless. The 6 paths of reincarnation are impermanent. I am the Grand Supreme. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged in the void, as he chanted a mantra in his heart. He waved his palms in front of him, and golden and white divine light shone forth. His memory was a little blurry and incomplete. He didn't remember where he had learned these mantras from. However, he knew that this was a mystic technique that he had once used to resist the 6 paths of reincarnation. The golden and white light quickly condensed in front of him to form a mysterious golden and white sword that was over 10,000 feet tall. As he continued to unleash his power, the huge sword also grew rapidly and became more and more majestic. After an unknown period of time, perhaps a day, perhaps a year, the golden and white divine sword had already grown to over 10,000 kilometers tall, and it had almost pierced through the entire void. Break! Ji Tianqing abruptly opened his eyes and let out a roar that could penetrate gold and split rocks. His body transformed into a streak of golden light and merged into the huge sword. In the next instant, the huge sword rose into the air and pierced through the endless void, bursting forth with boundless divine white light. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted. The vast and boundless black void was pierced through by the giant sword, and it quickly crumbled and shattered. The void collapsed, and the 6 paths of reincarnation also disappeared. The boundless darkness disappeared, and light returned to his surroundings. He opened his eyes and looked around. He saw that he was still sitting in the sky, and there was no one around him. Over 50 kilometers away, there were over 100 onlookers standing in the sky. Granny Long and Yun Yao were standing at the front of the crowd, looking at him with happy faces. They were excited and happy. Without a doubt, he had finally resolved the 6 paths of reincarnation tribulation. Intense cheers erupted from the crowd. Over 100 people were yelling in excitement. Ji Tianqing straightened his white robe and slowly stood up in the sky. He opened his arms and looked up at the sky, preparing to receive the divine light baptism. The tribulation cloud vortex in the sky quickly dissipated and turned into a ball of dense golden light that poured down like a flood. Whoosh! The golden light enveloped him and quickly drilled into his body, causing his magic power to rapidly increase. His strength also rapidly increased. This was the baptism of the heavenly Tao, as well as the reward for successfully transcending the tribulation. A full quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing finally finished refining the sacred golden light. Now, he had reached the 2nd level of the tribulation stage, and his strength had increased by several times. His entire body was emitting an extremely powerful aura. It was as if he had become one with the heavens and the earth, giving everyone a strong sense of oppression. Granny Long's feelings were the clearest, and she was the most shocked and amazed. This was because she was looking at Ji Tianqing as if she was facing God Lord Luo River. Unbelievable! He is only at the 2nd stage of the tribulation transcendence realm, but his aura is like that of a martial god. Even I feel reverence for him. What kind of monstrous genius was this? How can there be such a person in this world? Granny Long muttered to herself. She was so excited that she couldn't calm down. At this moment, the wind and clouds between heaven and earth dissipated. The sky regained its azure blue color, and the golden sunlight also reappeared, sprinkling down on the Luotian mountain. Ji Tianqing stepped across the sky and flew with the wind. He stood in front of Yun Yao. He looked at Yun Yao gently and smiled. Yao Yao, I've made you worry. When he was transcending the tribulation, Yun Yao saw that he was in an extremely dangerous situation. She was really frightened and worried to the extreme. Fortunately, he successfully resolved the tribulation and returned safely. Yun Yao nodded and said with relief, "It's good that you're fine. I knew that no matter how dangerous the heavenly tribulation was, it wouldn't be difficult for you." Let's go back. Ji Tianqing put his hand on her waist and turned around to leave with her. Granny Long was stunned for a moment before she reacted and hurriedly followed. Despicable brat, how dare you trick me? How can I let you go just like that? She frowned unhappily and rushed to the Cloud Water Palace to denounce him. Many deacons, God's disciples, and guards stayed where they were. They discussed in groups for a long time before gradually dispersing. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao returned to the Cloud Water Palace. They had just sat down in their room. Before Ji Tianqing could take a sip of tea, Granny Long came in. Tianqing, you brat. I haven't settled the score with you yet. Granny Long came in front of him and pretended to be angry. She said angrily, Don't think that I'll forget about it just because you've transcended the tribulation. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked at each other, and both of them revealed a smile. Yun Yao couldn't help but laugh. She sent a voice transmission to Tianqing and said, Explain yourself, Tianqing. I can't help you. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He looked at Granny Long with a puzzled expression and asked, Granny, what's the score between us? I don't owe you any money. Cough, cough. Granny Long almost choked. She snorted and said, Humph. Are you pretending to be confused with me? Fine. Then you can stay on Luotian Mountain. Don't even think about leaving. Ji Tianqing quickly pretended to be enlightened and said, Oh, I remember now. You're talking about our previous agreement. Alas, look at my memory. I actually forgot such an important thing. He smiled and said to Granny Long in a pleasant manner, Granny Long, I admit that I've schemed against you before. However, I also wanted to give you a surprise. Now that I've reached the second stage of the crossing tribulation stage, you should fulfill your promise and allow me to go to the northern border, right? Granny Long looked at him with a faint smile and asked in a low voice, You lied to me. Do you think I'll agree to this? This. Ji Tianqing was suddenly speechless. He didn't expect that Granny Long would deny it. Seeing that he was helpless, Granny Long couldn't help but laugh in her heart. You've always been creating miracles. It seems that nothing can stop you. Are you happy now? No matter how heaven-defying you are, there will be a time when you're defeated. At this moment, a figure wearing a black robe quickly walked in from the door. This black-robed youth was Ji Bai. Master, there's important news. He hurriedly walked into the room and was about to report the news. But when he saw that Granny Long was present, he quickly shut his mouth. Granny Long looked at Ji Bai and said to Ji Tianqing, All right, I still have things to do. I'll take my leave first. Tianqing, you stay in Cloud Water Palace. You're not allowed to go anywhere. After saying that, she got up and was about to leave. Ji Tianqing slightly frowned and quickly dissuaded her. Granny Long, please wait. He looked at Ji Bai and said, Ji Bai, if you have something to say, just say it. Ji Bai hesitated for a moment. Then he cupped his hands and reported, Master, I just received a message from Great Immortal. The situation in the mountain is critical. Great Immortal hopes that you can go back and take charge. Chapter 1861. After Ji Bai reported the news, he stood respectfully to the side, waiting for orders. Ji Tianqing took a deep look at him, and a look of approval appeared in his eyes. Ji Bai came at the right time, he just happened to help me. Thinking this, he looked at Granny Long with a solemn expression and said, Granny, as you can see, although I want to stay in Cloud Water Palace, I have no choice. Something big happened at home, the situation is very critical, I have to go back. Granny Long immediately frowned and looked at him with some doubt. Home? Where is your home? This question. Ji Tianqing showed an awkward expression and said with an apologetic expression, Please forgive me for not being able to tell you, Granny. Yun Yao understood that Ji Tianqing's home was the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. But since Ji Tianqing didn't want to say it, she also couldn't reveal it. Granny Long didn't force Ji Tianqing and asked with a solemn expression, Then how long will you be gone? Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and replied, 3 to 5 months at least, a year and a half at most. Granny Long thought for a while and nodded. Since you have something important to do, I won't stop you. However, I will have to send 2 experts to protect you, so I can be at ease. Ji Tianxing quickly waved his hand and refused. That's not necessary, Ji Bai and Shohei can protect me. Moreover, with my current strength, as long as I don't meet a martial saint expert, I won't have to worry. Granny Long was startled for a moment and nodded. That's right, you killed more than 300 tribulation-passing experts in the Sunset Divine Mine and also killed 8 of Yi Liushui's generals. Now you can be considered invincible under the martial saint realm. I was worrying too much. Many thanks for Granny's help. Ji Tianxing cupped his hands and showed a smile. Take care. If you have any difficulties or needs, don't hesitate to tell me. Granny Long said earnestly. Ji Tianxing shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Only then did Granny Long get up and leave. After she left the Cloud Water Palace, Ji Tianxing said to Yun Yao apologetically, Yao Yao, I just came back not long ago, and now I have to leave again for a while. Yun Yao shook her head gently and said in a gentle voice, Tianxing, you don't have to blame yourself. I understand. I'll just recuperate peacefully in the Luotian mountain and wait for your return. You can go in peace. However, the journey to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is long and you will definitely encounter all kinds of dangers. You must be careful. If you meet a saint-level expert, you must not be reckless. Ji Tianxing listened to her carefully and nodded. Okay, I'll remember your words. I'll come back as soon as I'm done. Then, he hugged Yun Yao and turned to leave. He left the Cloud Water Palace with Ji Bai and Shohei, flying north as fast as lightning. After they were far away from the Luotian mountain, he summoned the Black Dragon and had it carry them. Only then did he ask Ji Bai, in the message sent by the Yellow Dragon, did he say what exactly happened? Ji Bai shook his head expressionlessly and answered truthfully, the great immortal did not explain what happened. He only said that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is in danger and asked you to return as soon as possible. If you don't return, I'm afraid that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will be lost and everyone will be homeless in the future. Hearing him say this, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and said with a gloomy face, could it be the demons from the North Underworld Mountain? Ji Bai and Shohei were unable to answer, and their expressions became serious and worried. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was in the north of the Luotian kingdom, between the North Underworld Mountain and the ruins of God. From the map of the Xinwu continent, the location of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was very crucial. It was a very important and unique place. Of course, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was also the tallest mountain in the continent. It was known as the backbone of the continent and the place closest to the sky. The Black Dragon sped along and flew for a month before finally arriving at the northern border. On this evening, the Black Dragon was flying above a grassland. 200 miles in front of them was a majestic border city. Ji Tianxing and Ji Bai and Shohei looked down from the sky and could clearly see the ancient city with a radius of 100 miles. The ancient city was squarish and stood quietly on the grassland. The surrounding tall city walls were built with grayish-brown boulders and their surfaces were mottled with traces of vicissitudes. The ancient city had 2 gates in the north and south. They were both tall and majestic, and had a majestic aura. There were crisscrossing streets and alleys in the city, filled with pavilions and rows upon rows of houses. Ji Tianxing could tell at a glance that the ancient city had gone through thousands of years and had long since developed into a flourishing and prosperous city. However, when he stared at the ancient city and took a closer look, he immediately frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. It was currently evening and the sun was setting in the west. The dim yellow sun shone on the grassland, which should have been a peaceful and calm scene. However, the sky above the towering ancient city was covered with dark clouds and strong winds. The ink-like dark clouds shrouded the ancient city, like a heavenly curtain that covered a radius of 100 miles, plunging the entire ancient city into darkness. The dark clouds rolled and rolled, constantly condensing dazzling blood-red light, turning into strange and variegated shadows of giant beasts that bombarded the city below. Not only that, but there were also earth-shaking shouts, mixed shouts and screams coming from the city. Fires were burning everywhere in the city, emitting thick smoke. There were also hundreds of warriors fighting fiercely in the sky, displaying all kinds of magic light shadows. The raging wind, carrying with it the icy cold demonic aura and the smell of blood, drifted from the city. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed the reason. With a cold expression, he shouted in a low voice, "Damned devil race, they actually started a massacre in the city. Black Dragon, let's go and support them." Hearing his order, the Black Dragon did not hesitate to change direction and went straight to the ancient city. After a short while, it arrived at the southern gate of the ancient city. As it got closer, everyone could see more clearly. Under the 100-feet-tall southern gate, there were thousands of corpses of soldiers piled up, all of them turned into white bones. The torrential water in the moat had long been dyed red with blood. The city gate and the ground were also dark red, with gravel and broken weapons scattered everywhere. As for the flesh and blood of the soldiers guarding the city, they did not see any. Ji Tianqing glanced around and said in a cold voice, "Blood God's son." Sure enough, his gaze passed through the broken city gate and saw that inside the ancient city there were scattered white bones everywhere. After those human warriors died, their flesh and blood quickly melted, turning into wisps of blood chi that condensed into a blood mist in midair. This was what the blood god's son did, and Ji Tianqing could not be more familiar with it. His figure flashed through the city gate and entered the ancient city. The city was in chaos. Countless people ran wildly on the main road like a tide, desperately fleeing to the southern gate. Above the southern gate, there were 4 demon powerhouses that were 30 feet tall and wearing black armor. They were waving the myriad ghost banner and butcher's knife, wantonly slaughtering the fleeing people. Streaks of blood light and demonic shadows poured into the crowd like a flood. Chapter 1862. Ji Tianqing looked over and saw the 4 demon experts. Their body shape and appearance were very similar to the demons of the Tianxian continent. Their bodies were as huge as beasts, and their bodies were covered with black and purple hair. Their faces were as ferocious as beasts, and their bodies were wrapped in a layer of demonic chi. The strength of these 4 demons had reached the 7th level of the primordial soul realm. They joined forces to seal the southern city gate and wantonly slaughtered the fleeing civilians. Their ferocity was impressive, and no one could stop them. In the blink of an eye, more than 2,000 civilians who had just fled near the city gate were all killed by them. Numerous mangled corpses were strewn all over the ground, and it was a ghastly sight. Dark red blood gathered together and flowed on the ground like a stream. But soon, the invisible demonic power that filled the sky disintegrated the flesh and blood of the corpses. The corpses turned into white bones, and wisps of blood mist were emitted and gathered towards the center of the city. Ji Tianqing had long been accustomed to such a bloody and cruel scene. Back then, when he fought against the demon army in the Tianxian continent, he had even seen millions of corpses and mountains of bones. So, he did not feel much. Ji Bai and Shohei had never seen such a tragic scene, and were immediately stunned. It was the first time they had seen the ferocity and cruelty of the demons. Their blood was boiling, and their eyes were red with killing intent. What a cruel demon! How can there be such a cruel race in this world? They deserve to die. Ji Tianqing did not speak, and waved his palms expressionlessly, striking out 4 giant golden swords that attacked the 4 demons. Bang! 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 A series of muffled sounds exploded, and the 4 demon experts were struck by the giant swords, exploding into dust on the spot. They were killed instantly. Ji Tianqing did not stop, and turned into a golden light and flew towards the center of the city. Black Dragon, Ji Bai, and Shohei hurriedly followed, and along the way, they saw many demon experts slaughtering in the city. Those demons had the strength of the primordial soul realm, and they basically moved in small groups of 3 to 5 people. When they encountered ordinary civilians and warriors, they unscrupulously used demonic spells to kill the civilians. If the city guards came to attack, they would fight fiercely with all their might. The entire ancient city fell into chaos, like a bloody and cruel purgatory. Tens of thousands of city guards were divided into hundreds of teams to rescue the civilians and fend off the attacks of the demon race expert. However, the strength of the city guards was not strong. It was very difficult for them to block the attacks of the demon clan powerhouses, and they were also unable to effectively save the citizens. Every moment, countless civilians and soldiers fell under the demon race's butcher's knife. The aftermath of the battle spread throughout the city, destroying countless houses and streets. Broken walls, broken and arched streets, as well as burning houses and palaces could be seen everywhere. The common people had lived a peaceful life for thousands of years. When had they ever experienced such a cruel calamity? Most of the people were scared out of their wits. They ran away in a panic, screaming in fear. Ji Tianxing flew all the way to the center of the city. Along the way, whenever he saw a devil race expert, he would send out sword lights that filled the sky, killing all of the devil race experts. Black Dragon and Ji by Shohei were no exception. They constantly attacked and used powerful secret techniques to kill one devil race expert after another. 15 minutes later, when the crowd rushed to the square in the center of the city, they had already killed more than 60 devil race experts. The most intense battlefield was in the sky above the square in the center of the city. Dozens of primordial spirit realm and tribulation transcendence realm human experts were engaged in a fierce battle with more than 20 demon experts. Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry to make a move. He used his divine sense to scan the sky and observe the situation. On the human side, the leader was a white-haired old man wearing black armor and a golden cloak. The old man was at the 6th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm and had a dignified bearing. He was obviously the city lord of this ancient city. Beside him, there were several Tribulation Transcendence realm experts in armor. They were the ancient city's garrison general, the city guard supervisor, and the city lord's mansion's consecrators. The remaining 50 or so essence soul powerhouses were the residents of the city or the family members of the city lord's mansion. Some were rich merchants in the city, and some were the patriarchs or patriarchs of large families. In short, these experts were the city's nobles and mainstays. On the devil race's side, although they had fewer people, they were more powerful. The leader was 100 feet tall giant devil. It was pitch black all over and had bulging muscles that seemed to be condensed from rock. Crimson flames coiled around its body, making it look like a fire giant devil. Its thick arms brandished 2 flaming chains that splashed fire all over the sky, forcing the human experts to retreat. Not only was its body massive, but its aura was also violent. Its strength had also reached the 8th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Ji Tianxing dared to conclude that this giant devil was definitely one of the 36 demon monarchs. Beside the fire giant devil, there were 8 Tribulation Transcendence realm experts. Most of them were at the 2nd or 3rd level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The remaining dozen or so devils were only at the Essence Soul realm, but they were very ferocious and mysterious. They were of different sizes. Some were more than 100 feet tall, as terrifying as ancient ferocious beasts. Some were 7 feet tall, and their appearances were very similar to humans. Some had strange appearances. Their skin was golden, as if they were puppets made of gold. Some had the heads of humans and the bodies of beasts. Some were completely blue, and their appearances were very strange. However, these dozen or so devils were dressed in blood-red robes, and their bodies were wrapped in a layer of sinister sanguine light. Ji Tianxing sensed that something was amiss. After carefully observing them, he realized that they were not devils. Those dozen or so devils are not devils. They seem to be some strange foreign race, but they have all been demonized. They can use fiendish dermic arts and release powerful fiendish chi. How can this be? There must be a problem. He frowned in confusion, vaguely feeling that something was amiss. At that moment, the battle between the devils and the human experts reached its most intense moment. The dermic brilliance that blotted out the sky collided with the sanguine demonic fog, resulting in a deafening explosion. Rumble! The destructive shockwave was like a huge five-colored wave that spread out in all directions. The formations of both sides were in disarray from the impact. Many Essence Soul Realm experts were sent flying and landed in the ruins in all directions. The fiery devil monarch roared and chased after the white-haired city lord. They flew high into the sky and started fighting. Dozens of human race experts also spread out and began to fight with the devil race expert. Ji Tianxing suppressed the doubts in his heart. A black light flashed in his right hand, and he pulled out the sword of burial of heaven. His figure flashed and pounced into the battlefield, launching attacks on the devil race powerhouses. Black Dragon and Ji by Shohei were no exception. They used all their strength to use their ultimate techniques and attacked the devils fiercely. The sudden appearance of Ji Tianxing and the others surprised the human and devil experts. They revealed a strange look. In particular, the appearance of the Black Dragon caused both sides to be dumbfounded, revealing expressions of incomparable shock. Chapter 1863. While both sides were in a daze, Black Dragon spat out a destructive dragon breath. The dragon breath that was as black as ink was like a torrential flood, pouring down on the crowd of devil race. Instantly, several primordial soul realm demons were destroyed by the destructive dragon's breath, leaving only a few clumps of their souls. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Those souls flew across the sky, trying to escape. Ji Bai and Shohei acted in time, slashing out a sky full of saber light and sword shadows, immediately cutting those souls into pieces. Seeing this scene, the dozen or so demonized demons immediately revealed a ferocious look, and rushed over with murderous intent, besieging Black Dragon and Ji Bai. Both sides began to fight in the sky. Both of them performed their secret techniques and fought with each other with loud rumbling noises. Ji Tianxing moved alone, turning into a golden stream of light that flickered in the sky. His whereabouts were unpredictable, and he was as fast as lightning. Every time he stopped, a demon expert would be killed by his sword. He wantonly slaughtered the demon experts in the sky, but no one could stop him. In just 100 breaths of time, he had killed 15 demon experts, scaring the other demons so much that they did not dare to approach. There were only 13 demonized demons left, and they were busy besieging Black Dragon and Ji Bai, so they did not care about him. He temporarily stopped attacking and stood in the sky, overlooking the situation in the city. He saw that in the east, south, west, and north of the ancient city, a large number of demon experts were in chaos, fighting with the soldiers guarding the city. Those demon experts were all in the Essence Soul Realm, and there were more than 100 of them. Ji Tianxing also used his divine sense to detect that there were 2 blood gods illusions lurking in the city, crazily devouring flesh and souls, rapidly increasing their strength. Ordinary demon experts, no matter if they are in the Essence Soul Realm or the Tribulation Realm, there are always ways to resist and destroy them. But those blood gods' illusions are too special, and it is difficult for the human experts to destroy them. This thought flashed through his mind, and a cold light gushed out from his eyes. Then, he used his divine sense to lock onto the blood god's illusions nearby, and rushed over in a flash. The blood god's son was hiding in a majestic palace. He had transformed into a blood dragon that was hundreds of meters long and was circling above the palace. It spun at a moderate speed, emitting a mysterious and formless power. It devoured the bloody mist that filled the sky, and its body was slowly growing. Just as it was eating heartily and devouring the blood chi and soul essences, a golden light suddenly flashed behind it. Shua! Ji Tianxing's figure suddenly appeared. With a grim expression, he brandished the sword of burial of heaven and fiercely chopped down. Boom! The 300-meter-long golden sword struck the blood dragon with a violent force, cleaving it in two. Only then did the blood dragon wake up as if it had just woken up from a dream. The two halves of its body gathered together and quickly returned to its original state. It suddenly turned its head, widened its scarlet eyes, and stared at Ji Tianqing. It roared angrily, "Damn human worm, how dare you sneak attack me?" The blood dragon's strength had already reached the 9th firmament essence soul realm. It was just a step away from breaking through. If no one obstructed it, it would reach the tribulation transcendence realm after killing all the citizens in the city and devouring all the blood chi and soul essences. Unfortunately, this goal was destined not to be realized. You're just a lowly blood god's son. How dare you be so arrogant? Ji Tianqing shouted coldly and swung his sword again. Die! The sword of burial of heaven lit up with a sacred golden light. Instantly, it slashed out 18 golden swords that enveloped the blood dragon's figure. The sword flashes were too fast. Ji Tianqing's strength completely crushed it. It wanted to dodge, but there was no way it could. Bam! 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 Amidst a series of dull thuds, the blood dragon's 100-meter-long body was shattered by the sword flashes, turning into more than 10 blobs of bloody mist. The bloody mist churned violently and rapidly gathered together in an attempt to return to its original form. Furthermore, there was a smug and arrogant sneer from within the bloody mist. "Ha ha ha ha! You ignorant worm, how dare you dream of killing me? I'm immortal and indestructible. Even if you use up all your magic power and techniques, I'll still be unharmed. How can a lowly race like you understand my nobility and power?" Ji Tianqing was too lazy to talk nonsense with it. He shouted coldly with an expressionless face, "How ignorant and pathetic!" As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his left hand and unleashed a sacred white light that covered the sky toward the bloody mist. The bloody mist had just gathered, but before it could condense into a form, it was enveloped by the dense white light. As soon as the white light came into contact with the bloody mist, it burst forth with a sacred and invincible power and immediately dispersed the bloody mist. The blood god's son was instantly terrified and let out a sharp and ear-piercing scream. "Ah! Damn worm, what the hell is this?" Ji Tianqing ignored it. His left hand formed a seal and manipulated the dense white light to quickly shrink into a ball of light. In just 10 breaths, all the bloody mist was swallowed by the white light and turned into the purest source of power, flowing back into the heaven-mending pearl. A blood god's son, that was about to break through to the tribulation realm, was purified by Ji Tianqing just like that. Without stopping, he turned into a stream of light and rushed toward the East City. In the prosperous East City district, more than 20 demon powerhouses were stirring up trouble. They used powerful demonic secret techniques and summoned tens of thousands of white skeletons to kill wildly in the streets and alleys. There were also dozens of ferocious-looking demon beasts and ghosts that were hundreds of feet tall. They were wantonly killing civilians and city guards in many buildings. More than 3,000 city guards, led by more than 20 powerhouses, were desperately resisting and counterattacking. More than 100,000 civilians were hiding in their houses in fear and despair. Some of them were fleeing on the street. However, they couldn't escape the fate of being slaughtered. Batch after batch of them died tragically. Their flesh and souls turned into blood energy and gathered in the sky, forming a dense bloody mist. Their white skeletons, under the control of the demon powerhouses, quickly turned into skeleton warriors and crazily pounced on other civilians. In a certain house in the East City district, there was a 30-foot-tall blood-red giant standing in the sky above the garden. It stretched its arms and looked at the sky. It opened its bloody mouth and crazily swallowed the bloody mist that filled the sky. As countless blood chi and soul essences rolled over and merged into its body became more solid, and its strength continued to grow. Just as it was swallowing the bloody mist to its heart's content, a golden light fell behind it. Before it could react, more than a dozen dazzling sword lights struck it with a loud bang. Bam, 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 bam. A series of muffled sounds exploded and reverberated in the sky. Violent shockwaves spread out and destroyed the entire house into ruins. This 30-foot-tall blood god's son was also slashed into pieces by the sword lights and turned into a dark red bloody mist. It saw that the attacker was a white-robed human youth. It immediately shouted in a ferocious tone, "Despicable worm, how dare you interrupt my meal? Your death is not to be regretted." Chapter 1864. The blood god's son did not recognize Ji Tianqing and thought that he was the human powerhouse guarding the city. As it roared, it controlled the blood mist to gather quickly and was about to take shape. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more words. He raised his left palm and shot out a holy white light that enveloped it. Blood god's son sneered in disdain. He also released a ray of blood-red light that blasted out. Boom! The two rays of light, one red and one white, collided and exploded with a dull sound. The holy white light was normal, but the dark red blood light melted like snow and disappeared. The blood god's son was stunned and let out a roar of fear. Bastard! What kind of spell is this? How can it restrain my indestructible body? The blood god's son had already passed the first heavenly tribulation and reached the first level of the tribulation transcendence realm. Even the heavenly tribulation could not defeat it. In its mind, it was absolutely invincible and indestructible. However, it did not expect that the mysterious white light could restrain it perfectly. It immediately panicked. In fear, it quickly turned into a blood wave and escaped into the distance. However, how could Ji Tianqing give it a chance to escape? Swoosh! The dense white light quickly spread and turned into a huge sky curtain that covered a radius of 10 miles. The blood god's son was immediately trapped and could not break out no matter how hard it tried. Moreover, once the blood light touched the white light, it would disappear on the spot and be swallowed by the white light. It fled in fear and ran around in the white light curtain, letting out desperate roars and curses. After a while, the white light curtain shrank to the size of a water tank under Ji Tianqing's control. The blood god's son followed in the footsteps of its companion and was completely swallowed by the white light. It was purified into origin energy and poured into the heaven-mending pearl. Ji Tianqing withdrew his left palm expressionlessly and retracted the white light into his body. He turned around and was about to leave. However, a few demon powerhouses not far away noticed him and immediately rushed over with murderous intent. Ji Tianqing glanced at them coldly as his lips curled into a sneer. "Humph! You're so eager to die? I'll fulfill your wish." Heavenly Dragon Palm. He raised his palms, and golden and purple light surged out of his palms. They condensed into two golden dragons that were thousands of feet long, and blasted towards the demon race powerhouses. Not only did the 1,000-meter-long golden dragon possess the power to destroy heaven and earth, but its body was also surrounded by countless bolts of purple lightning. Rumble! In the next moment, the two golden dragons struck several demon race powerhouses, causing a deafening explosion. The few Devil Clan experts were smashed into pieces on the spot. Their souls were also drowned by the lightning that filled the sky. Ji Tianqing didn't even look at them. He immediately turned around and flew up into the sky. By the time he reached the top of the ancient city and reached a height of 10,000 zhang in the sky, those devil experts had already turned into dust, their bodies and souls destroyed. Tens of thousands of feet above the ground, the sky was a vast expanse of azure blue, and below was a vast expanse of white clouds. Ji Tianqing stood in the sea of clouds and frowned as he looked ahead. He saw two experts fighting fiercely. One of them was a flame troll. The other was the white-haired city lord in black armor. He was already heavily injured. The cloak behind him was tattered like a few rags. The black armor was also shattered. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest, revealing pale golden bones. Dark red blood gushed out, dyeing his armor and robe red, and spilling into the sea of clouds. His white hair draped messily over his shoulders and was stained with blood. Although he was heavily injured and weakened, he still stubbornly held on, doing his best to block the flame troll's attacks. However, his end was already decided. In at most 15 minutes, he would be killed by the flame troll. In comparison, the flame troll's injuries were lighter. It couldn't even be considered a heavy injury. Its body grew to thousands of feet tall, like a mountain made of rocks, and its entire body was surrounded by endless bloody flames. Its palace-sized palms held 2,000-foot-long flaming chains. It wildly swung them, turning the surrounding dozens of miles into a sea of fire. Ji Tianqing was 50 miles away, but he could still feel the scorching waves of fire coming at him. At this moment, the flame troll took the opportunity to raise the two dragon-like flaming chains and smash them at the white-haired elder. The white-haired elder tried to retreat, but he couldn't dodge. He was about to be hit by the flaming chains. At this critical moment, a dazzling golden light suddenly cut through the sea of clouds and appeared behind the flame troll. Sun-shattering sword. Swoosh! A giant golden sword that was over 10,000 feet long appeared in the sky and slashed toward the fire demon with boundless divine might. The flame troll sensed that something was wrong. It wanted to teleport away, but it was too late. Kaboom! With a deafening sound, the 1,000-foot-long sword slashed at it, cutting off its left shoulder. Countless black fragments flew out. The violent and shocking impact sent the flame troll flying. It rolled across the sky and crashed into the sea of clouds 20 miles away. This sudden turn of events caused the white-haired old man to be stunned for a moment. His face was filled with astonishment. Originally, he had given up all hope. He had been determined to live and die with the ancient city and fought until the last moment. However, he didn't expect that at this most dangerous moment, someone would suddenly appear to help and send the flame troll flying with one sword. Just how powerful was this expert? Thinking of this, the white-haired elder turned his head and looked to the side. He saw a white-robed youth standing in the sky. When he saw the white-robed youth's appearance, his pupils constricted. He was shocked. He's so young? Did he really injure the Nine Flames Demon Lord with one sword? The white-haired elder thought that the person who helped must be a veteran martial lord who had cultivated for thousands of years like him. However, he didn't expect that person to be so young. He looked to be in his early 20s. After regaining his senses, he quickly went up and cupped his fists in the air. He said in a serious tone, "I'm Ning Songyun. Thank you for saving me." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, "City Lord Ning, there's no need to be so polite. Go and treat your injuries. Leave the demon lord to me." Ning Songyun cupped his fists again and said, "Thank you very much." After saying that, he quickly retreated far away. He took out an elixir and swallowed it to suppress his injuries. At the same time, the Nine Flames Demon Lord flew out of the sea of clouds. It stood in the sky and stared fiercely at Ji Tianqing with its dark purple eyes. Its body was surrounded by blood-red flames. That sword strike had indeed severely injured it. Its entire left arm had been chopped off. There was a neat cut on its left shoulder with many cracks. Dark red blood, burning like lava, dripped from the wound continuously. It stared at Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. It said in a low and resentful tone, "Brat, I'm the Nine Flames Demon Lord. Since you can injure me, you're definitely not a nobody." Chapter 1865. He is indeed one of the 36 Demon Kings. Ji Tianqing murmured to himself when he heard the Nine Flame Demon King's name. He looked at the Nine Flames Demon Lord coldly and smirked. He said in a mocking tone, "Is your master, the ancestor demon god, doing well?" The Nine Flame Demon King was stunned. He frowned and stared at Ji Tianqing with mixed feelings. "I only follow the orders of the demon saint. I don't know what you are talking about. You, on the other hand, quickly tell me your name." Although the nine-flame demon king pretended to be confused, Ji Tianxing could tell that the nine-flame demon king knew what he was talking about. Listen carefully. I am the one who will take your life, Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing growled coldly as an unparalleled domineering aura burst out from his body. Hearing this, the nine-flame demon lord and Ning Songyun, who were not far away, trembled. Their faces were full of shock. You're that Ji Tianxing? The Nine Flames demon lord let out a cry of disbelief. His eyes were filled with joy and surprise. Ha ha! I've worn out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by sheer luck. This monarch actually met you here. I'm truly too lucky. Ji Tianxing, do you know that the entire North Underworld Mountain is looking for you? You will die today. Thank you for giving me such a great credit. Ning Songyun looked at Ji Tianxing and exclaimed in surprise. I didn't expect him to be Ji Tianxing, the #1 God's disciple in the kingdom of gods, the #1 genius in the continent, the hero who saved the Sunset Mine. He came to the north border and saved me personally. Ning Songyun was quite emotional. His old face was a little red, and the white beard on his chin was also trembling. 2 months ago, he had heard about what happened at the west border and the legend of Ji Tianxing saving the Sunset Mine. He had thought that if he had the chance in the future, he would meet the legendary genius with his own eyes. He never thought that his wish would come true without any warning. At this moment, Ji Tianxing was the first to strike. He swung his sword towards the Nine Flames Devil Lord. You want to capture me and bring me back to the ancestral devil god for a reward? You're not qualified. Broken Moon Sword. The Burial of Heaven swung his sword and slashed out a blazing white sword light that was hundreds of meters long. It slashed down towards the Nine Flames Devil Lord. Before the sword light arrived, a formless sword intent enveloped the Nine Flames Demon Lord. It was an indescribable pressure, extremely divine and domineering. The Nine Flames Demon Monarch felt as if he had fallen into a quagmire, unable to move an inch. He wanted to dodge the sword light, but he was powerless. At the critical moment, it let out a furious roar and swung its flaming chain with all its might, smashing it against the blazing white sword light. Boom! With a muffled explosion, the blazing white sword light collapsed on the spot, turning into millions of white light fragments that scattered in the sky. The flaming chains in the hands of the Nine Flames Devil Lord were also cut apart by the sword light. The broken half of the flaming chains shattered into crimson flames that spread out like a wave. The violent and terrifying force also sent it flying 10 miles away. However, it was extremely tenacious and quickly stabilized its body. Crimson flames surged out from its body, forming another flaming chain. Even its broken left shoulder was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, rapidly growing a new left arm. Be *starred. You're courting death. I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death. The Nine Flames Devil Lord roared furiously. 18 flaming pillars that were thousands of meters long shot out from its body and rushed into the sky. 9 flames of the heavens. It waved its arms crazily, controlling the 18 flaming pillars that were like giant dragons. They crisscrossed and shot towards Ji Tianxing. The 18 flaming pillars were divided into a few different colors, containing 9 different attributes. Some were violent, some were sinister, some were icy cold, some were blazing hot, and there were even some that contained deadly poison. In an instant, the 18 flaming pillars formed a huge net and drowned Ji Tianxing's figure. The Nine Flames Devil Lord's expression was extremely ferocious. It roared furiously, "Little B** starred, go to hell!" As its voice fell, the 18 flaming pillars exploded at the same time. The boundless flames, which contained the power to destroy everything, struck Ji Tianxing with a loud bang. The huge 7-colored fireball rose up like a mushroom cloud, occupying the sky within a radius of 10 miles. The area within 100 miles was turned into a world of flames. Even the air was burned away by the scorching heat, turning into a vacuum zone. 100 miles away, Ning Songyun watched this scene with his eyes wide open. He was instantly filled with horror. His expression was incomparably worried, and his eyes were filled with deep despair. His gaze became dim and lifeless. How could this be? Could it be that young Master Ji? Impossible. Young Master Ji is the #1 prodigy in the world. He was able to kill 8 of Yi Liushui's generals. His combat strength is outstanding and unparalleled. He will be fine. It is impossible for him to be killed by the 9 Flames Devil Lord, Ning Songyun muttered to himself. His heart was clenched tightly as he stared at the sea of flames. After a while, the 7 colored flames that covered the sky gradually dissipated. The sky was about to return to normal. At this moment, a white-robed figure rushed out of the sea of flames and rushed towards the 9 Flames Devil Lord. It was Ji Tianxing. Even though he was hit by the 18 flaming pillars, he was not injured. His expression was as calm and indifferent as usual. At the critical moment, he used the heaven and earth Dharma body and merged his body with the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. No matter how powerful the 18 flaming pillars were, they could not destroy the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. That was why he was safe and sound. Swoosh! When he rushed out of the sea of flames, he was in front of the 9 Flames Devil Lord in the blink of an eye. The 9 Flames Devil Lord thought that even if his killer move, 9 Flames in the heavens, could not kill Ji Tianxing, it could at least severely injure him. However, he did not expect Ji Tianxing to be unharmed. When Ji Tianxing was in front of him, the 9 Flames Devil Lord widened his eyes in shock and let out a roar of disbelief. No! This is impossible! The 9 Flames Devil Lord was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses and wanted to block the attack, it was already too late. God-slaying spear! Ji Tianxing shouted emotionlessly. He raised his left palm and slapped at the 9 Flames Devil Lord, releasing boundless golden light. The mysterious golden flames condensed into a golden spear that was 10 feet long and as thick as a pillar. It pierced towards the 9 Flames Devil Lord's chest. Boom! With a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens, the golden spear pierced through the 9 Flames Devil Lord's chest and exploded. A dazzling golden mushroom cloud rose up in the sky and shone brightly for 300 miles. The 9 Flames Devil Lord's lava-like body collapsed on the spot. It exploded into countless rocks and scattered in the sea of clouds. However, only his physical body was destroyed. His spiritual soul was not destroyed. Chapter 1866. The 9 Flame Devil Lord's divine soul was a ball of dark red light. His body was destroyed, and he knew that he was no match for Ji Tianxing, so he made a prompt decision to escape. He did not even say a word. He immediately used a secret technique of the Devil Dao and turned into a blood vortex. 10,000 miles devil concealment. Swoosh! In just 2 breaths, the huge blood vortex pierced through the sky and disappeared into the void. In the next moment, when the blood vortex appeared again, it was already 200 miles away. The 10,000 miles devil concealment was a top escape technique of the Devil Dao in the ancient times. If a devil sage used it, he could move 10,000 miles away in a snap of his fingers. Since the ancestor devil god entered the North Underworld Mountain 2 years ago, the devil race's people celebrated and all the major forces were quickly unified. The 36 devil lords, including the 9 Flame Devil Lord, were all rewarded by the ancestor devil god. The 10,000 miles devil concealment was a secret technique that the ancestor devil god gave to the 9 Flame Devil Lord. After it was mastered, it was only used a few times, but it was effective every time. Ji Tianxing was about to kill the 9 Flame Devil Lord's divine soul. Unexpectedly, the 9 Flame Devil Lord turned into a blood vortex and disappeared into thin air. Ji Tianxing could not lock on to its aura, nor did he know where it had escaped to. He could only give up the chase. He frowned and thought for a while. He whispered, "The secret technique of the devil Tao that it used seems to be 10,000 miles devil concealment?" After a moment of silence, he put away the sword of burial of heaven and turned to fly back. "It's lucky that it escaped. It won't be so lucky next time." Just as he returned to the sky above the ancient city, Ning Songyun flew toward him and bowed excitedly. Ning Songyun greets young Master Ji. "Young Master Ji, thank you for saving Kangi City. I express my gratitude on behalf of all the people in the city." Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said calmly, "Didn't you just thank me? Why do you have to say it again?" Ning Songyun hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, "No, no, no. I didn't know your identity just now, so I just thanked you verbally." He did not expect young Master to be the #1 God's disciple in the country, the #1 heavenly talent in the continent, and the hero who saved the sunset heavenly mine. This old man has long heard of young Master's deeds and has always wanted to. Ning Songyun was in awe of Ji Tianxing from the bottom of his heart. His tone was also very sincere. Even though he was the head of a city, a famous martial lord who had cultivated for 1,000 years. But compared to Ji Tianxing, his status was insignificant. Ji Tianxing raised his hand to interrupt him. He said expressionlessly, "There's no need to flatter me. There are still a large number of demon experts causing trouble in the city. Dealing with them first is the proper thing to do." As he spoke, he descended from the sky and flew into the ancient city. Ning Songyun was stunned for a moment, then nodded quickly and said, "You're right, young lord." He quickly caught up with Ji Tianxing and held his sword in high spirits, ready to fight. When the two returned to the ancient city, the chaotic battle was coming to an end. Originally, the Nine Flames Devil Lord had brought nearly 200 demon experts with him. Now there were only 30 left. More than 100 of them had been killed. The remaining 30 or so demon experts panicked and fled when they heard that the Nine Flames Devil Lord had escaped with serious injuries. Among the remaining 30 or so demon experts, there were more than 20 demon experts who were slaughtering the civilians in the city and fighting with the soldiers who were guarding the city. There were also 9 different races who were wearing blood-red robes. They were desperately besieging He Long and Ji Bai. Ji Tianxing immediately flew to the center of the city and joined the battle. He waved his sword and killed the 9 different races to help He Long and Ji Bai. Ning Songyun wisely flew to the north of the city to save the civilians and the soldiers who were guarding the city. He waved his sword and killed a few demon experts. The fierce battle lasted for a while, and the sky darkened again. The light from the spells covered the sky and the sun. When the demon experts saw Ji Tianxing and Ning Songyun, they knew that the Nine Flames Devil Lord was in trouble. Thus, the numerous Devil Clan powerhouses no longer lingered in the battle and fled out of the city. Ning Songyun led the soldiers who were guarding the city and the local experts to start a fierce chase. About half an hour later, the group killed another dozen or so Devil Race Masters. Only 10 demonic cultivators managed to escape, leaving Kangi City. Ning Songyun did not chase further. He led the soldiers back to the city and quickly started to deal with the aftermath and treat the wounded. Near the square in the city, Ji Tianxing's battle with the 9 different races was about to end. He had killed 4 of the 9 strange-looking non-humankind warriors. Black Dragon and Ji Bai guarded the dark side and killed 3 outsiders. Only 2 of them were still alive. However, they were seriously injured and had no chance to escape. Ji Bai and Shou He attacked at the same time and were about to kill the 2 alien experts. Ji Tianxing suddenly shouted, "Don't kill them. Keep them alive." Ji Bai and Shou He immediately understood. They changed the direction of their swords and sabers and sent the 2 alien experts flying. They fell to the ground with blood all over their bodies. The 2 alien experts had their hands and feet cut off. They fell to the ground and twitched in pain. The battle was finally over. Ji Tianxing put away the sword of burial of heaven and landed beside the two alien experts expressionlessly. He looked at them coldly. Hei Long, Ji Bai, and Shou Hei also came over. Without Ji Tianxing's order, Ji Bai and Shou Hei used their capture skills at the same time. They caught the two alien experts and sent them to Ji Tianxing. Master, please punish them. Ji Tianxing nodded and stared at the alien expert on the left. This alien expert was 2 meters tall and his body shape was very similar to a human's. However, his whole body was golden as if it was made of gold. He was a tall and sturdy man. There was not a single strand of hair on his body. There was also a sharp horn on his forehead that looked like a rhinoceros horn. Ji Tianxing stared at him and said, "If I'm not wrong, you should be from a foreign continent in the south. From your appearance and aura, you seem to be from the Golden Glaze clan." The Golden Crystal clan man pursed his lip. His face was covered with dark brown blood. He glared at Ji Tianxing and angrily gasped for breath. Ji Tianxing looked at the alien expert on the right. This alien expert was 5 meters tall and looked like a bear. He had 2 large heads, 2 wings, and 4 hooves. He was covered with silver hair that flickered with silver light and emitted a cold aura. Ji Tianxing looked at him and said, "You're from the northern continent. You should be from the Ice Bear clan. Looking at the ice mark on your forehead, you seem to be from the Ice Bear clan?" The Ice Bear expert glared at Ji Tianxing with bloodshot eyes. He bared his teeth and roared. Blood kept dripping from the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a cold smile. He said in a mocking tone, "You and the other aliens that were killed before came from different continents, but you've all been demonized and are working for the demon race. Also, you're all wearing blood-red robes to distinguish you from the demon race. Looks like this is another scheme of the ancestor demon god. Tell me honestly what's going on." The strong warrior of the Golden Glaze clan and the Ice Bear glared at Ji Tianxing with murderous intent. They refused to speak. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Fine. Since you've all been demonized, you probably won't confess. Then I'll get the answer myself." As he spoke, his right hand formed a seal. He sent out a ray of white spiritual light that enveloped the Golden Crystal clan man. Great Soul Assimilation Technique. The white spiritual light immediately enveloped the Golden Crystal clan man. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Ji Tianxing also closed his eyes. He controlled his spiritual power to invade the Golden Crystal clan man's spiritual sea and search his soul memories. After about 10 breaths, Ji Tianxing finally found the answer and understood the whole story. Chapter 1867. As soon as Ji Tianxing retracted his hand, the Golden Glaze man collapsed to the ground and fainted. The great soul-sucking technique that he had just used was a famous forbidden technique from ancient times. Using this secret technique, one could directly invade the other party's spirit and memories to search for information. It was very powerful and tyrannical. The weaker martial artists who had their spirits sucked would most likely lose their lives. Even those with relatively strong souls would find their souls in chaos, and they would become delirious and deranged. Thus, the great soul-sucking technique was known as a forbidden technique. Under normal circumstances, Ji Tianxing would not use it lightly. However, the target of this technique was a demonized foreign race, a blood guard nurtured by the ancestral demon god, so he did not feel burdened. Today, the orthodox great soul-sucking technique had long been lost. Only a few incomplete techniques remained, but they were still regarded as ultimate techniques in the martial world. What Ji Tianxing had used was the most orthodox great soul-sucking technique, which was infinitely profound. He had seen countless images and information from the Golden Glaze powerhouse's memories, and he understood the whole story. This Golden Glaze man had originally been one of the strongest powerhouses in the southern continent. He was the emperor of the Golden Glaze race, and he controlled millions of Golden Glaze people. In the southern continent, there were only 7 or 8 primordial spirit powerhouses who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. But half a year ago, 2 tribulation-transcending realm demons had used some unknown method or treasure to break into the southern continent. The 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses had wantonly slaughtered tens of millions of people on the continent. The Golden Glaze race was one of the victims. Not only had millions of their people been killed, but countless geniuses and elite generals had also died in battle. In the time of crisis, the Golden Glaze Emperor had no choice but to take action and resist the 2 demons. Unfortunately, he could not even withstand 2 moves from his opponents before he was severely injured and fainted. The 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses did not kill him. After kidnapping him, they captured 2 other primordial spirit powerhouses from other races. The Golden Glaze Emperor and the 2 tribulation-transcending realm powerhouses were taken to Shunwu continent and brought back to Dark North Mountain. After that, the 3 of them were sent to an extremely terrifying abyss of blood, and after 49 days of suffering and torture, they were tempered into their current state. Although their strength had greatly increased, their defense and combat strength had become more powerful, and they could even release terrifying demonic secret techniques. They were still able to do so. However, their martial Tao foundations had been destroyed. They were like combat puppets, and they no longer had the chance to break through and advance. They could only obey the orders of the demon race, and were forced to wear similar red robes. They were named the Blood-Robed Guards, and they fought for the demon race with their lives on the line. Although Emperor Jin Lu's experience sounded tragic, Ji Tianxing did not sympathize with him. After all, after becoming a Blood Strike Guard, he had become a demon that only knew how to kill. In the past few months, this person had followed the demon race's experts into battle. He had broken through more than 30 cities and slaughtered more than 200,000 civilians. Even the water of the Eastern Sea would not be able to wash away such a bloody sin. Then, Ji Tianxing used the same trick again. He shot out a beam of blazing divine soul light that enveloped the ice bear. The giant ice bear struggled with all his might before his divine soul was invaded, and he fell unconscious. Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and quickly read the ice bear's divine soul memories. After 10 breaths, he found the answer. The ice bear's experience was almost the same as Emperor Jin Lu's. Also half a year ago, 2 mysterious demon race experts had invaded the northern continent and killed their way into the ice bear's territory. This ice bear expert was the current emperor of the ice bear tribe. He ruled over millions of miles of territory and had tens of millions of ice bear tribe members. Unfortunately, he was no match for the 2 demon race experts. After a few exchanges, he was severely injured and fell unconscious. When he woke up, he was already brought back to North Underworld Mountain. He and 4 other primordial soul stage experts were sent to a dark, bloody, and terrifying abyss where they endured 49 days of tempering and demonization. In the end, he lost his self-awareness and became a violent, bloodthirsty bear that only knew how to kill. Under the leadership of the demon race experts, he wantonly massacred the citizens of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. He had already committed a heinous crime. When Ji Tianxing retracted his hand, the Ice Bear Emperor was also unconscious, just like Emperor Jin Lu. One is the Ice Bear Emperor of the Northern Continent, and the other is Emperor Jin Lu of the Southern Continent. There were also a dozen or so blood-robed guards who came from different continents. The ancestral demon god's methods are truly vicious. He actually captured these foreign powerhouses from different continents and refined them into demonic puppets. However, the Shunwu continent and the other continents have long been sealed by the gods, so they are not connected. What method did the ancestral demon god use to allow those demon lords to travel between the continents? Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows and muttered with a solemn expression. Since the ancestral demon god can allow those demon lords to travel between the eastern, southern, western, and northern continents, does that mean he can also send demon lords to the profound sky continent? He suddenly thought of this question, and his expression became even more gloomy. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. No. I have to figure out what's going on as soon as possible. At this moment, Shohei pointed at the unconscious Emperor Jin Lu and Ice Bear Emperor and asked in a deep voice, "Master, how should we deal with these two foreign powerhouses?" Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and waved his hand. They have all been tempered by demonic secret techniques and have long been demonized. They have lost their minds. I will try to purify them first. If not, I can only kill them to prevent future troubles. With that, he activated the power of the heaven-mending orb and waved his hand to release a sacred white light that drilled into Emperor Jin Lu's body. The dense white light released a mysterious and vigorous power that quickly dispelled the demonic qi in Emperor Jin Lu's body. However, Emperor Jin Lu had already been completely demonized. Under the purification of the white light, his flesh and blood immediately corroded and festered, emitting thick purple-black smoke and emitting powerful toxins. In just a few breaths, he had turned into a large pile of black ash, leaving not even a trace of bone or flesh. Only a large cloud of purple-black poisonous fog was left floating in the sky. In order to prevent the poisonous fog from spreading and killing the people of Kangi City, Ji Tianxing used the heaven-mending orb to swallow it and let it slowly purify it. Next, he shot out another white light that enveloped the Ice Bear Emperor's body. Like Emperor Jin Lu, the Ice Bear Emperor had also been completely demonized. Under the purification of the sacred white light, its 30-meter-tall body quickly corroded into ashes and billowed with poisonous smoke. After a while, it also turned into a cloud of black ash and turned into a large cloud of purple-black poisonous fog. Ji Tianxing used the heaven-mending orb to swallow the poisonous fog. Only then did he clean it up. He flew into the sky and overlooked the entire Kangi City to observe the situation. The war had ended long ago, and the remnants of the demon race had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1868. Seeing that the situation in Kangi City had stabilized, Ji Tianxing was ready to leave. Anyway, Ning Songyun would be in charge of the aftermath. He had no time to waste here. Swoosh! He put away the black dragon and flew to Ning Songyun with Ji Bai and Shohei. Ning Songyun was giving orders and assigning tasks to several generals guarding the city. When he suddenly saw Ji Tianxing, he hurriedly bowed and greeted him. He then introduced Ji Tianxing to the generals. The generals had also heard of Ji Tianxing's legendary deeds. They were all flattered and bowed in excitement and awe. Ji Tianxing waved his hand indifferently and said, "You don't have to be so polite. Saving the people is more important. City Lord Ning, you will deal with the aftermath. When you report to Luotian Mountain, don't mention that I have been here." Why is that? Ning Songyun was stunned for a moment, his face full of confusion. He couldn't understand. Wasn't Ji Tianxing the pride of Luotian Mountain and the #1 God's disciple in the Divine Kingdom? He had made such a great contribution, but he didn't report it to Luotian Mountain? Did this young Master Ji sneak out? Seeing that Ning Songyun was secretly guessing, Ji Tianxing explained, "I have a heavy responsibility on this trip. I must keep my whereabouts a secret and must not be leaked." Ning Songyun suddenly understood. He quickly nodded and said, "I understand. Don't worry, young master." After a pause, he thought of another thing and asked tentatively, "By the way, young Master Ji, when I was chasing after the remnants of the Ghost Clan, I caught a captive." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly ordered, "Where is he? Bring him here quickly. I want to interrogate him personally." Ning Songyun immediately understood and waved to a general beside him. The general quickly turned and left. After a while, he came to Ji Tianxing with a blood-stained and crippled demon clan expert. "Reporting to young Master Ji, we have already extorted a confession by torture. But this guy refused to give up and refused to reveal any information." The middle-aged general reported the situation truthfully, his tone filled with hatred. "Let it go. Ji Tianqing ordered expressionlessly as he sized up the demon with a sharp gaze. This was a male demon. He was more than 3 meters tall, and his whole body was covered with purple hair. He was wearing a black armor. This person had strength at the 9th firmament essence soul realm. His arms had been severed at the roots and his body was a bloody mess. He was already on his last breath. When the middle-aged general released it, it immediately let out a muffled roar from its bloody mouth. It even used its last bit of magic power to escape into the ground. Ji Tianqing flicked his finger and shot out a golden light, which immediately turned into a golden chain and firmly bound it. It couldn't move and could only lie on the ground, panting weakly. Ji Tianqing didn't bother to waste time to force a confession. He directly used the Grand Spirit summoning technique and waved his hand to release a white light of divine soul, which enveloped its body. It rolled its eyes and fainted on the spot. Ji Tianqing invaded its divine soul and began to search through its memories. The demon expert's name was in Tuesday. He had strength at the 9th firmament essence soul realm. He was the chief of a particular tribe and had lived for more than 800 years. 2 years ago, when Dark North Mountain was unified, he submitted to the Great Fiend Sage and became an elite combat general. Thanks to his ancestors, he was greatly appreciated by the Great Fiend Sage. He was like a fish in water under the Great Fiend Sage and learned a lot of secret information. His divine soul memories could be said to be as vast as the sea. They were like the river of stars in the sky, boundless and endless. When Ji Tianqing's consciousness came into contact with the river of memories, he immediately came into contact with boundless information and saw countless memories. His consciousness followed the river of memories and went against its flow, searching through Intu's experiences and memories in reverse order. Especially the memories of the past 2 years, they were of utmost importance to his search. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing checked through Intu's memories of the past 2 years. After analyzing and summarizing, he finally learned some secrets and found the information he wanted. Things were just as he had expected. All the changes in the North Underworld Mountain started 2 years ago. Before that, Dark North Mountain had been in hibernation for 10,000 years. Few demons stepped out of Dark North Mountain. Within Dark North Mountain, the 4 great fiend sages were constantly divided. They each had their own territories and ruled over hundreds to thousands of tribes. Only when the ancestor god returned and entered the ancient divine abyss of Dark North Mountain did the division that lasted for 10,000 years end. The 4 great fiend sages were forced by their ancestors to enter the ancient divine abyss to receive the ancestor god's baptism and bestowment. No one knew what the 4 great fiend sages experienced in the divine abyss. The demons only knew that when the 4 great fiend sages walked out of the divine abyss, they became even stronger. Furthermore, they were unexpectedly united and obeyed the ancestor god's orders. What happened next was self-evident. The 4 great fiend sages consolidated their factions and gathered large amounts of resources and bravehearts. They began sharpening their blades in preparation. A year ago, the 4 great fiend sages followed the ancestor god's orders and plans and gradually launched an attack on the Luoshui divine nation. 8 months ago, the great fiend sage entered the ancient divine abyss alone to receive the ancestor god's orders. A few days later, the great fiend sage returned to the sacred palace with an ancient secret treasure. He gathered a few demon monarchs under his command and chose 2 of them who were powerful and had special constitutions. The great fiend sage bestowed the ancient secret treasure to them and gave them a special mission. After that, every month or so, the 2 demon monarchs would bring back a few strange experts of different races. Those experts of different races would be sent to the ancient divine abyss to receive the ancestor god's secret refinement. In a total of 8 months, the 2 demon monarchs brought back more than 40 experts of different races. After those experts of different races were refined and demonized, they became the infamous blood-robed guards. Antu heard the conversation between the great fiend sage and the two demon monarchs and knew that those experts of different races were experts that they had captured from other continents. Only then did Antu know that there were other continents in the world. He was very curious about the outside world, so he looked for opportunities to get close to the two demon monarchs and ask them for information. When the two demon monarchs saw that he was being taken care of by the great fiend sage, they did not hide anything from him and told him a few things. Antu gradually understood that the ancient secret treasure that the ancestor god had bestowed upon them was called the 9 Netherworld Soulbreaker Shuttle. This treasure could travel through the void and different spaces, and its effects were extremely powerful. However, only tribulation transcending powerhouses with special constitutions could use this treasure. Furthermore, it could only be used twice a month. Within 8 months, the two demon monarchs had traveled to several continents outside of the Shenwu continent. Their movements were very smooth, and they could freely travel between continents. Every time, they would capture a few experts of different races. There was only one continent that was extremely strange. It seemed to be protected by some kind of divine power, and even the 9 Netherworld Soulbreaker Shuttle could not enter. Chapter 1869. Ji Tianxing had learned many secrets from Antoine's soul memories. Of course, he could guess that the strange continent was the Tianxian continent. As for why the 9 Netherworld soul-shattering shuttle could not enter, he had some doubts. Although he had some guesses, he could not confirm the answer. Fortunately, there is only one 9 Netherworld soul-shattering shuttle, and it cannot enter the Tianxian continent. That's why I'm relieved, Ji Tianxing murmured to himself, revealing a relieved expression. Although he had recovered a lot of Kenshin's memories in the Shenwu continent, he still cared about his family. However, he was still concerned about his friends and family on the Tianxian land. He was unwilling to see the devil elite warriors invade and start a massacre on the Tianxian land. At this time, Ning Songyun saw that Ji Tianxing had finished casting the spell, so he asked, "Sir Ji, how do you plan to deal with this ghost?" "Of course I'll kill him." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and sent out a sacred white light that covered Antoine's body. Antoine's flesh was instantly corroded by the white light and quickly turned into a pile of black ash. Ji Tianxing straightened his clothes and cupped his hands towards Ning Songyun. "City Lord Ning, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave." Ning Songyun and the other generals quickly bowed and said in unison, "Farewell, Sir Ji." Ji Tianxing took Ji Bai and Shohei and flew into the sky as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing into the distance. Ning Songyun and the others stood in place and watched Ji Tianxing's group disappear into the horizon. Only then did they withdraw their gazes and go about their own business. After leaving Kangyi City, Ji Tianxing summoned his black dragon and rode it towards the north. North of Kangyi City, 8,000 kilometers away, was the border, where a vast mountain range stretched endlessly. In less than an hour, the black dragon had crossed the vast mountain range and left the territory of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. As they continued to head north, they saw towering mountains and ancient forests along the way. This area was very vast, spanning tens of millions of kilometers. It was called the 100,000 Mountains. To the northwest of the 100,000 Mountains was the continent's largest peak, Tianzhu Mountain. In the northeast, it was connected to the gloomy North Underworld Mountain. In other words, between the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and the North Underworld Mountain, there was only 100,000 great mountains between them. 6 hours later, it was already late at night. The black dragon was flying high in the sky when Ji Tianxing's divine sense suddenly detected something strange. 100 miles to the right, in the pitch-black night sky, there was a 1,000 feet long flying boat, rushing towards the south. The gigantic flying boat was emitting billowing demonic qi, and its target was the border of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. It must be the demon army of the North Underworld Mountain rushing to the border of the Divine Nation to join the war. Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. It would have been fine if you hadn't met me, but since I've bumped into you, then it's your bad luck." He muttered in a low voice and rushed to the right in a flash. In just a few breaths, he had quietly caught up to the pitch-black flying ship. A black and red flag with a ferocious demon god totem was hung on the huge airship. The body of the flying ship was also engraved with many demon gods and asuras, making it look ferocious. Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and vaguely detected that there were at least 2,000 demonic auras in the flying ship. Among them, one of the strongest auras had reached the second stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The other dozen or so auras were weaker, but they were all at the Essence Soul realm. The remaining 2,000 auras were all demon warriors at the Spirit Tempering realm. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to draw the sword of Burial of Heaven. Holding the sacred sword with both hands, he slashed with all his might. Heaven-cleaving sword. The sword of Burial of Heaven lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a giant golden sword that was 1,000 feet long. It slashed down from the sky towards the flying ship. Kaboom! Amidst the loud noise, the giant golden sword slashed the flying boat in the middle, cutting it in half on the spot. Dazzling bloody light and purple flames burst out. Although the flying ship was a low-grade Tribulation Transcendence artifact, it was protected by a powerful array. But in front of Ji Tianqing, under the sword of Burial of Heaven, the flying ship was as fragile as paper, unable to withstand a single blow. Hundreds of demon warriors were flung out of the broken flying ship and fell to the ground in a sorry state. The dozen or so demon race experts did not expect to be attacked so suddenly, and were also in a panic. Before they could react, Ji Tianqing took advantage of the situation to pursue and slash out sword lights that filled the sky. Sword of Shattering Sun. 18 giant golden swords, carrying invincible divine power, ruthlessly slashed the two halves of the flying ship. Immediately, the two halves of the flying ship exploded into countless pieces and scattered in the night sky. At least 300 demon race soldiers were killed on the spot by the sword lights or the power of the explosion. Those who were lucky enough to survive were all injured, either lightly or heavily, and were fleeing in panic. Black Dragon and Ji by Shohei hurriedly rushed up, spewing flames that covered the sky and slashing out endless sword lights, wantonly slaughtering the demon race soldiers. The dozen or so demon race experts roared angrily and rushed over. Half of them resisted Black Dragon and Ji by Shohei, while the other half joined forces to besiege Ji Tianqing. The two sides engaged in a fierce battle in the night sky, fighting with all their might. A loud rumbling sound echoed fiercely between the mountains. The dazzling brilliance of magic power illuminated the night sky for 100 miles. This battle with a great disparity in strength only lasted for a quarter of an hour. The strongest demon race commander, who had the strength of the second layer of the Tribulation Transcendence stage, could not withstand 3 moves from Ji Tianqing, and his body and soul were destroyed. The dozen or so demon race generals of the primordial spirit realm did not last long, and were killed by Ji Tianqing and the others. As for the 2,000 or so demon race warriors, they were even weaker and not worth mentioning. Ji Tianqing and Ji by Shohei slaughtered them like wheat, and a sword fell down a large number of them. After a quarter of an hour, more than 2,000 demon race warriors were all annihilated, turned into pieces of flesh and blood, and scattered in the mountain forest. Ji Tianqing did not even bother to collect the spoils of war. After taking back the holy sword, he continued to rush to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the next 20 days, Black Dragon flew 5 million miles continuously. Along the way, they also encountered several dangers, and were besieged by some ferocious demon beasts. After all, the 100,000 mountains was uninhabited, and it was the gathering place of all kinds of fierce demon beasts. According to ancient legends, a divine dragon had once appeared here. That evening, the sun was setting in the west. The dark golden sun was about to set in the west, and the world was covered with a layer of dim sunlight. The endless mountain range seemed even more vast and lonely. Black Dragon was flying thousands of feet high in the sky. Ji Tianqing stood on the dragon's back, and Ji Bai and Shohei stood behind him. In front of everyone, about 500 miles away, a hazy gray shadow appeared at the end of the sky. That gray shadow was incomparably majestic, like a pillar supporting the sky, traversing between heaven and earth. The gray shadow stood in the mountains, and the top was submerged by the sea of clouds, as if it was connected to the sky. Seeing the figure of the giant peak, Ji Bai and Shohei both showed a rare smile. Chapter 1870. Ji Tianqing stood motionless on the black dragon's back as he stared at the gigantic figure in the sky. Although his face was expressionless, his deep eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Without needing Ji Bai and Shohei's reminder, he knew that the gigantic figure was Tianzhu Peak. In fact, his familiarity with Tianzhu Peak far exceeded that of Ji Bai and Shohei. 1,000 years ago, he had traveled from west to east across the entire Shenwu continent and had been in the world for more than 20 years. Along the way, he had challenged the powerhouses and top geniuses of various races and countries. He had won every battle without a single defeat. In the end, he had arrived at this vast mountain range. After searching for half a month, he had finally found the legendary backbone of the continent, the pillar that supported the heavens, Tianzhu Peak. Then, he had taken his few followers and occupied Tianzhu Peak, establishing a training ground and a sacred palace. Tianzhu Peak was isolated between heaven and earth. Although it was the highest peak and backbone of the entire continent, it could not gather the world's spiritual energy. Thus, he had used his ability to change the heavens and the earth, changing the layout of the 108 peaks around Tianzhu Peak. The 108 peaks formed a Big Dipper astral array and a Big Dipper spirit array. With Tianzhu Peak as the center, the area within 100,000 kilometers was enveloped by these two large arrays, forming a rarely seen sacred land of martial arts. Later, he had made a bold declaration that he would challenge all the martial saints in the world on Tianzhu Peak. In the next 20 years, the martial saints of various races had come to challenge him on the peak of Tianzhu Peak. Without a doubt, he had defeated all the martial saints who had come to challenge him, and his name had spread throughout the Shenwu continent. From then on, Kenshin's name had spread to every corner of the Shenwu continent, and he was revered by everyone. Every day, countless aspiring youths and martial artists from all over the world would rush to Tianzhu Peak to become Kenshin's disciple. Tianzhu Peak had become even more prosperous, and it had become one of the top sects in the world. Its power was second only to the three divine kingdoms. However, after he had left, the former prosperity had gradually withered away. Today, Tianzhu Peak had been reduced to a second-rate power and had been forgotten by the world. Ji Tianqing stood on the black dragon's back and looked at the gigantic figure that was getting closer and closer. Countless memories surfaced in his mind, and his mood became somewhat lonely and sorrowful. Ji Bai and Shohei saw that he was silent and sensed that his aura was rather bleak, so they both shut their mouths. However, neither of them could guess what Ji Tianqing was thinking. The two of them thought that Ji Tianqing was in a bad mood because he was worried about the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After 100 breaths of time, the black dragon flew to the vicinity of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and stopped 1,000 feet above the ground. As he got closer, Ji Tianqing could see more clearly. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains in front of him was somewhat different from when he left back then. This giant mountain that covered an area of 1,000 miles and was tens of thousands of feet tall was no longer surrounded by spiritual energy like it used to be. Back then, there was a clear river at the foot of this giant mountain, like a belt of sparkling and translucent pearls. The entire mountain was shrouded in a thin layer of 5-colored spiritual light. Even in the dark of night, the 5-colored light would still flicker. Between the steep cliffs and the white sea of clouds, groups of spirit cranes would fly past from time to time, letting out crisp and high-pitched cries. At the peak of the mountain, there was a 5-colored waterfall that contained spiritual energy, pouring down from the cliff, like a rainbow hanging on the cliff. Not only that, the almost straight cliffs were covered with vines and various small trees. Those very spiritual vines and small trees would bear fragrant and delicious spirit fruits, exuding a refreshing aroma of green wood. In short, the pillar of heaven's mountains in the past was like a paradise on earth, like a divine mountain where the gods live. But now the entire giant mountain was somewhat dark, losing the luster of spiritual energy, as if it was covered with a layer of dust. On the bare cliffs, there were only a few vines and trees, exposing large patches of gray-brown rock. The foot of the mountain was covered with withered yellow leaves, and even the river that coiled around the pillar of heaven's mountains had long been blocked by boulders and mud, turning into a lifeless pool. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned, and a thought flashed through his mind. As long as the great formation of heavenly spirits and earthly fiends is still operating, the surrounding 100,000 miles is the holy land of martial arts, a paradise. But in this situation, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is so thin. Could it be that the 2 great formations that I set up back then have been destroyed? He had a bad premonition, and his face became increasingly cold. The black dragon carried him and flew upwards, passing through the sea of clouds at a moderate speed, flying towards the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was really too high, more than 20,000 feet above the ground. It was covered by the sea of clouds. The mountain that surpassed the sea of clouds was still 80,000 feet high, definitely the highest in the world. Standing in the sea of clouds and looking at the surroundings, one could see a very spectacular scene. Below everyone's feet was a white sea of clouds, and there was nothing in all directions. Only the Pillar of Heaven's mountains stood in the sea of clouds, its peak connected to the blue and flawless sky. In the process of flying upwards, Ji Tianxing recalled some past event. Back then, I chose to set up a training ground here, firstly, because this place is the pillar that supports the heavens, symbolizing the unique status of being alone and far away. Secondly, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is 10,000 feet high, the mountain is straight and steep, and even ordinary birds can't reach the peak. Ordinary people want to learn from me, but they can't even reach the peak, so naturally, they will retreat, avoiding the trouble of taking the test. Indeed, back then, Kenshin's name spread all over the world and countless geniuses came to learn from him. But those who could reach the peak were all outstanding people of the same generation. Those who were able to pass the 3 tests were even more exceptional martial arts geniuses. Therefore, none of the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains were mediocre. Not long later, the black dragon flew to the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains against the biting cold wind. The peak of the mountain was an open space with a radius of 300 miles, and the terrain was quite flat. Actually, when Kenshin came here, the peak of the mountain was uneven, and was full of jagged rock. The height of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was actually 10,300 feet. In Kenshin's view, 9 was the limit, and exceeding it was as bad as falling short. A height of 9,999 feet meant that it was unparalleled in the world, and was at the peak of martial arts. Therefore, with a sweep of his sword, he shaved off 4 feet of the mountain peak, turning it into a flat piece of land. In the middle of this piece of land, he built an ancient holy city. The holy city was not big, but there were 18 magnificent palaces and 36 magnificent houses. Around the ancient holy city, there were forests, herb gardens, mountain peaks, and so on, and there was also a beast garden for spiritual beasts. Back then, there were more than 1,000 disciples and odd-job workers living in the holy city, as if they were immortals who were isolated from the world. How carefree and happy! This place was also the holy mountain closest to the sky, and one could reach out to touch the sky and pluck the stars. It was the most unique place. In Kenshin's heart, this was his favorite cultivation holy land, and even the god kingdoms of the 3 martial gods could not be compared to it. However, after 1,000 years. Chapter 1871. The forests, herb gardens and mountain peaks around the holy city were all withered and bleak, without much vitality. Especially the spirit beast garden in the east, there were many rare and precious spirit beasts. Not only were there groups of spirit cranes, there were also heavenly horses. But now, in the huge spirit beast garden, there were only a few spirit beasts. The gate and walls of the spirit beast garden were dilapidated, with broken bricks everywhere, and the ground was full of holes. The situation of the herb garden in the west of the holy city was not much better. The large formation that protected the herb garden had already disappeared, leaving only a few scattered small formations that were still flickering with a weak light. Most of the flower beds and herb gardens had turned into a grayish-brown wasteland, with many holes and ravines on the ground. Only a few innermost herb gardens were still planted with some herbs and spirit flowers. In short, Ji Tianqing stood on top of the mountain peak and looked around, only to see a scene of decay and withering. He could not believe that this gloomy, dilapidated and gray holy city was the holy land of martial arts that he had opened back then. Ji Bai and Shou Hei had been standing behind Ji Tianqing, deeply feeling the change in his mood. Their mood was also somewhat heavy. With a gloomy face they explained, "Master, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was definitely not like this in the past. This place was a top holy land of martial arts 1,000 years ago. It's just that in the past 1,000 years, many forces have been secretly plotting against us, causing our sect's power to continuously weaken, resulting in today's situation." Ji Bai and Shou Hei knew that the current situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was really worrying. It had already reached a critical point. The two of them were absolutely loyal to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Naturally they would not despise it, let alone have any thoughts of betrayal. However, some disciples with weak willpower had already started to escape. Therefore, when the two of them saw Ji Tianqing's grave expression, they were worried that Ji Tianqing would despise the decline of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Ji Tianqing did not say anything. He rode the black dragon over the forest and landed in the holy city. The layout of the holy city was rather peculiar. It was circular and sat on top of the mountain. The outer circle was 36 ancient houses, and the inner circle was 18 imposing palaces. In the middle of the holy city was a dojo with a radius of 100 miles. It was surrounded by many palaces and mansions. The huge dojo was paved with dozens of different kinds of stones, all of which were extraordinarily effective spirit stones and gemstones. The ground was dark green in color and was engraved with patterns and patterns of great formations. This formation with a radius of 100 miles was created by Kenshin, and was known as the Firmament Formation. The Heavenly Dome Formation was the core of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It had 81 transformations and could transform into all sorts of formations with extraordinary effect. In the middle of the dojo stood a black stone tablet that was thousands of feet tall. It was like a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. Without a doubt, the towering black sword steel was based on the Sword of Burial of Heaven. It was also the totem of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Under the huge sword steel was a pedestal with a radius of 1,000 feet. There were many patterns and seal characters engraved on it. The lines of bold and powerful characters were also written by Kenshin. They were about the righteousness of the way of the sword and the rules of Tianzhu Mountain. Even after thousands of years, the black sword steel was still intact. It added a sense of vicissitudes to it. The black dragon landed on the dojo. Ji Tianqing looked at the sword steel. After looking at it for a while, his expression became much gentler. No matter how much the Pillar of Heaven's mountains declined, no matter how disappointing the disciples were, the sword steel was still intact. At the very least, the dojo and the sword steel had been preserved, which was a blessing in disguise. Ji Tianqing stood under the sword steel and stared at the pedestal with a complicated gaze. He looked at the patterns and words on the black stone wall. The lines of bold and powerful characters emitted an unparalleled domineering aura and sword intent. Even after thousands of years, the ancient characters seemed to have come alive. They made people not dare to look at them directly. They were filled with reverence. As a master, I will not hide anything. I will not hesitate to die for my disciple. Only then can I have a long history. These words came from Kenshin. They were written before the rules of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. It was the general outline of the 36 rules of the sect. 1,000 years ago, the martial masters and disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains always remembered these words and engraved them in their hearts. Therefore, 1,000 years ago, the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains was known as the number 1 sect under the heavens. Ji Tianxing silently recited the general outline of the sect rules. His gaze gradually moved up and looked at the sky along the sword steel. Suddenly, he raised his head and laughed. Ha 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 ha! The endless river flows to the east, the waves wash away the heroes. Right and wrong, success and failure vanish in the blink of an eye. The holy mountain is still here, the sunset is still red. The white-haired fisherman and woodcutter on the river, accustomed to the autumn moon and spring breeze, meet again with a pot of turbid wine. How many things have happened in the past and the present? Ji Tianxing opened his arms and laughed wildly. His tone contained a strong sense of desolation and carefreeness. The black dragon, Ji Bai and Shou Hei looked at his back with complicated expressions. They felt the endless sense of desolation, and their hearts became heavy. The burial of heaven also flew out from Ji Tianxing's body and turned into a black stream of light. With a xiu sound, it drilled into the huge sword steel. Suddenly, the 1,000 feet tall ancient sword steel seemed to come alive. It emitted a dazzling cold light and let out a sword cry that pierced through the clouds. Ji Tianxing waved his big sleeve and stood proudly under the sword steel. His long hair fluttered in the wind as he shouted with a solemn expression, "The sea turns into mulberry fields, the stars move. The divine splendor of the past is gone, but I have returned from reincarnation. 3,000 disciples bring peace to the world, 100,000 divine swords suppress the heavens." Along with the vigorous sound waves, a vast and mighty, formless aura swept out like a gale and engulfed the entire dojo. The 10,000 feet tall Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, as if it had a soul, obeyed his command and yielded to his pressure. It actually shook 3 times. At this time, a white-haired Taoist wearing an apricot-yellow Taoist robe and holding a golden horsetail whisk rushed over with a few elders in purple robes. When everyone stepped onto the dojo, they saw Ji Tianxing, the black dragon, Ji Bai and Shou Hei. They also heard Ji Tianxing's desolate laughter. Especially the last few words, it was like thunder piercing their ears, deafening their ears. The white-haired Taoist's body suddenly trembled. His footsteps stiffened and he froze on the spot. An incomparably shocked expression appeared on his old face. His eyes widened as if he saw the most inconceivable thing in the world. He was so excited that his whole body trembled. Master? The white-haired Taoist was so excited that his beard trembled. He muttered to himself. His old eyes were red and wet. His legs went soft and he almost knelt down to pay his respects. The few elders in purple robes were still confused. They only saw the white-haired Taoist's expression change and did not know what was going on. One of the elders angrily glared at Ji Tianxing under the sword steel. He even shouted with a dignified tone, "Who is making a racket here? How dare you be rude to our sect's sacred sword?" As soon as he finished speaking, the white-haired Taoist suddenly turned his head and glared at him fiercely. He angrily shouted, "Bastard! Shut up for this old man." Chapter 1872. The few elders were puzzled. They did not understand why the white-haired Taoist had such an intense reaction. The sword steel in the middle of the training field was the sacred sword totem of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. It had a sacred meaning. That unfamiliar white-robed youth was actually shouting insolently under the holy sword. This was simply too disrespectful. Even the few elders saw Ji Bai and Shou-hei following behind the white-robed youth. Everyone could guess that the white-robed youth could be the successor of Kenshin. But in everyone's opinion, since he was the successor of Kenshin, he should be respectful towards Kenshin and the sacred sword. But the white-haired Taoist was the leader of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even he did not get angry, nor did he scold the white-robed youth. Instead he showed a protective attitude. This made everyone even more puzzled. Why would the yellow dragon immortal have such a reaction? Just as the few elders were bewildered and secretly puzzled, the white-haired Taoist quickly rushed to the center of the training field. His expression was very complicated. He was full of anticipation, but also a little uneasy. His eyes stared at the white-robed figure. In a short 10 breaths, everyone arrived under the 1,000-feet-tall sword steel. Ji Bai and Shou-hei came back to their senses and quickly greeted everyone. "Greetings, great immortal and elders." The two of them respectfully bowed and then stood at the side, waiting for orders. Ji Tianqing's emotions gradually calmed down. He turned to look at the white-haired Taoist and the few elders. When he and the white-haired Taoist looked at each other, their pupils shrank, their eyes flashed with a touch of splendor. Especially the white-haired Taoist. His body trembled, his eyes widened, and he let out a low roar in his heart. "It's him. It's really him. It's definitely Master. That appearance, that aura, that gaze, it's definitely the same." The few elders had joined the Pillar of Heaven's mountains later. They had not seen the original body of Kenshin. But the white-haired Taoist was Kenshin's follower and guard-cum disciple. He was very familiar with everything about Kenshin. Even after 1,000 years, he could still clearly remember Kenshin's gaze, aura, and every move. At this moment, the white-haired Taoist's old eyes welled up with hot tears. He could no longer hold back the excitement and sorrow in his heart. He bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing. Unfilial disciple Huang Long greets Master. Ever since the Sword God left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Huang Long had been missing his master for the past 1,000 years. Especially after the news of the Sword God's death spread, Huang Long was even more devastated. However, he remembered his master's teachings and shouldered the heavy responsibility of protecting the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. No matter how much pain he felt, he had always persevered. No one knew how many hardships and sufferings he had endured in the past 1,000 years. No one knew how big of a blow the news of the Sword God's death was to him. Now that Taoist and Taoist was the heavens and earth, and Taoist not feel the heavens and earth. The yearning and remembrance that had lasted for 1,000 years had caused his state of mind to completely fall apart. At this moment, he felt as if he had returned to 1,500 years ago, when he first climbed the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and became Kenshin's disciple. That was why he performed a disciple's salute in front of everyone. His deep bow contained too many emotions. Other than himself, only Ji Tianqing could understand it. Ji Bai and Shou-hei were dumbfounded. They stared at the Huanglong Taoist, their eyes full of shock. The 5 elders were also stunned. They stared at the Huanglong Taoist and couldn't help but exclaim, "Great Immortal! What are you doing? Great Immortal, please get up. You've got the wrong person. That's Kenshin's successor." The elders reminded the Huanglong Taoist. 2 elders even reached out to help him up. However, the Huanglong Taoist was a martial saint. He didn't move at all and maintained his bowing posture. Who could help him up? Ji Tianqing also looked at him with a complicated gaze. He looked at his old and white Taoist robe, his white hair that reached his waist, and his aged face. His heart was heavy and filled with emotion. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and suppressed his complicated emotions. He smiled and said, "Huang Long, we haven't seen each other for 1,000 years. How's your cultivation of the Imperial Sword Sutra? Master didn't personally guide you. You're not slacking off again, are you?" Ji Tianqing's voice was gentle and calm, but there was a sense of pressure. When the Huanglong Taoist heard this familiar voice, his body trembled. He couldn't help but burst into tears. 1,500 years ago, when he was cultivating with Kenshin, he often had to wait for a long time to see Kenshin. Every time he saw Kenshin, Kenshin would ask him about his cultivation. Especially in the last 20 years, Kenshin would ask him about his cultivation of the Imperial Sword Sutra every time. However, the Imperial Sword Sutra was an incomparably profound sword technique. His cultivation progress was very slow. When he met Kenshin, he was scared witless. He was afraid of being scolded by Kenshin and even more afraid of disappointing Kenshin. Since Kenshin left, he thought that he would never hear these words again in his life. However, he had never imagined that after 1,000 years, he would once again hear those familiar words. Moreover, they were exactly the same as before. He raised his sleeve to wipe away the tears on his old face. He replied with a trembling voice, "Master, disciple has already comprehended the first 7 levels of the Imperial Sword Sutra. Now I have reached the 8th level." Ji Tianxing showed a gratified smile and nodded. "Not bad. The 7th level is the biggest threshold. Once you enter the 8th level, you can hide your sword in the void and travel 1,000 miles. The two of them, one old and one young, were like master and disciple, conversing with each other in a serious manner. The 5 elders, Ji Bai and Shou Hei, had long been at a loss. They were all speechless and stunned on the spot. Everyone's expression and eyes were very strange. But no one dared to speak and interrupt this strange scene in front of them. The elders looked at each other and shook their heads. They were in grief as they discussed with each other. Sigh, the pitiful great immortal misses the martial ancestor too much. He actually treated that person as the martial ancestor. Crazy. They are all crazy. The great immortal has become muddle-headed. Even that kid has gone crazy. We can't let them go on like this. If the disciples of the sect see this, what will happen? Yes. The great immortal is the only remaining martial saint in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. He is also our teacher. We can't let him be humiliated and teased like this. That kid is the martial ancestor's successor in vain. He is actually so rude, it is too disappointing." Just as the elders were secretly discussing, Ji Tianxing had already raised his hand and helped Huanglong Daoist up. Huanglong Daoist looked up at his face. His old face was filled with excitement and respect. Ji Tianxing looked at him kindly and said with a smile, "All right, now that you are a 1,000-year-old monster who has become an immortal, how can you lose your bearing? Don't let the juniors see you as a joke. No matter what the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain is today, since I have returned, I will purge the enemy and restore the glory of the sect." Huanglong Daoist nodded and said with a firm tone, "Huanglong has long known and always believed that a godly person like Master will never fall. You are destined to move unhindered in the universe and be the only one in the world." Chapter 1873. In the entire Tianzhu mountain, the Huanglong Daoist was the one who understood Kenshin the most. It was because he understood Kenshin the most that he was unable to accept the fact that Kenshin had already fallen. For the past 1,000 years, he had been pondering, how could an unparalleled god like Kenshin fall? He had also been fantasizing that perhaps on a certain morning, that peerless figure in a white robe would descend from the sky and descend upon Tianzhu mountain once again. 100 or 200 years ago, the Huanglong Daoist had once revealed this idea. As a result, many elders and deacons felt that the great immortal had become muddle-headed. He actually had such a ridiculous imagination and hallucination. After the news spread, the disciples of Tianzhu Mountain were all discussing this matter in private. In everyone's eyes, the great immortal had also become a crazy old immortal. Seeing everyone's reaction, the Huanglong Daoist no longer expressed similar thoughts. After a few decades, everyone gradually forgot about this matter. However, the few elders did not expect that now that Kenshin's successor had arrived, the great immortal's old habits had resurfaced. Everyone looked at the Great Elder and secretly transmitted their voices. Great Elder, quickly make a decision. The Great Elder, Nye Tianchen, was a tall and sturdy white-haired elder. His square face was bronze-colored, and he looked very upright and dignified. He frowned and ordered in a deep voice, "Feng Ping, Lang Jing, the two of you bring the great immortal back and comfort him. This brat who doesn't know etiquette, I will personally teach him a lesson." The fourth elder, Feng Ping, had once gone to the divine kingdom of Taihao and had a face-to-face conversation with Ji Tianxing. He had a good impression of Ji Tianxing. He had never expected that Ji Tianxing's first visit to Tianzhu Mountain would cause such a huge disturbance. After receiving the Great Elder's order, Feng Ping and Lang Jing looked at each other and walked to the Huanglong Taoist's side. The two of them did not care that the Huanglong Taoist was talking. They supported him on both sides and dragged him away. "Great Immortal, this is not the place to talk. I will bring you to the main hall." "Great Immortal, please come to the main hall. This disciple has already ordered people to prepare the spirit tea." The Huanglong Taoist frowned and glared at Feng Ping and Lang Jing. With a stern tone, he shouted, "What are you two doing? This old man has just met with Master. How dare you obstruct me? You two little bastards, quickly release this old man." But the more he struggled, the more certain Feng Ping and Lang Jing were that he was crazy. Without any explanation, they dragged him and turned to walk towards the conference hall. At the same time, Grand Elder Nye Tianchen led the second elder and third elder to Ji Tianxing, their faces filled with rage. "Brat, you're the lucky one who obtained Grandmaster's inheritance?" Nye Tianchen stared sternly at Ji Tianxing and said in a deep voice, "We've heard about you a long time ago, but due to the current situation, we didn't summon you. I didn't expect you to be so ignorant and impolite. You've just arrived at Tianzhu Mountain, and you haven't even paid your respects to Great Immortal and Grandmaster, yet you pretended to be Grandmaster and teased Great Immortal. How should you be punished?" As he spoke, Nye Tianchen released an invisible pressure from his body and pressed down on Ji Tianxing. The second elder and third elder stood on his left and right. They also glared at Ji Tianxing and released a strong sense of pressure. However, Ji Tianxing stood there with an indifferent expression. He looked at the three of them calmly, without the slightest regret or fear. The pressure of the three elders had no effect on him at all. Seeing that the situation was not good, Ji Bai and Shou He quickly knelt down beside Ji Tianxing and pleaded with Nye Tianchen. "Grand Elder, please calm down. Young Master Ji is new here and doesn't know the rules of our sect. Grand Elder, please forgive young Master Ji." Before they finished speaking, Ji Tianxing released an invisible force and lifted them up, straightening their backs. "Ji Bai, Shou He, this has nothing to do with you two. Just follow behind me," Ji Tianxing said with an indifferent expression. He walked past the three elders and walked towards the meeting hall. Ji Bai and Shou He froze for a moment. They didn't dare to follow Ji Tianxing, but they were supported by an invisible belief and hurriedly followed. The three elders were actually ignored by Ji Tianxing. The three of them became even angrier. Nye Tianchen suddenly turned around and glared at Ji Tianxing's back. He shouted angrily, "Stop! You little brat, how dare you be so arrogant!" The second elder and third elder also opened their mouths and sternly reprimanded Ji Tianxing for being arrogant and rude. Ji Tianxing stopped and with his back facing the three elders, he said indifferently, "The three of you have offended Grandmaster, which is already disgraceful. Considering that you are young and entered the sect late and didn't know, I will not argue with you and forgive your crimes. But this is the last time. If you do it again, you will be punished according to the sect rules." A deep and forceful voice reverberated in the dojo, emitting a shocking pressure. When his voice fell, Ji Tianxing walked away and walked towards the meeting hall without looking back. The three elders stood in the same place and were stunned for a long time before they came back to their senses. Recalling Ji Tianxing's words, The three of them were so angry that they laughed. Ha ha! We offended Grandmaster? This brat is really crazy. Does he really think that he is our sect's Grandmaster? Because we are young and entered the sect late? This is ridiculous. Despicable brat, how dare he tease us like this? I will not let him off easily. The three of them shouted angrily and hurriedly chased after Ji Tianqing. They wanted to take him down on the spot and punish him severely. But at this moment, the sword steel in the middle of the training hall suddenly lit up with a sacred golden light, releasing an invisible divine power that suppressed heaven and earth. Swoosh! The invisible divine power descended from the sky and instantly suppressed the three elders. Suddenly, the three of them could not bear the divine power of heaven and earth, and were immediately forced to kneel on the ground in a row. The three of them were terrified and looked at the sword steel in disbelief. Then, they looked at Ji Tianqing's back. The sacred sword has shown its spirit? How is this possible? This has never happened before. What's going on? The sacred sword has released a mighty divine power to punish us? How can this be? Could it be that the brat and Grandmaster, just as the three of them were discussing in shock, the invisible divine power suppressed them again and forced them to kneel on the ground? No matter how you looked at it, the three of them were kneeling on the ground and respectfully watching Ji Tianqing leave. As a result, the three elders' expressions were even more terrified and their hearts were in turmoil. Oh my God! After 1,000 years, the sacred sword has shown its spirit? It's over, it's over. The sacred sword is our sect's totem. It can't be wrong. It seems that we have really offended Grandmaster. Great Immortal knows Grandmaster the best. He can't be wrong. That white-robed young man, could he be Grandmaster's reincarnation? The three elders looked at each other and discussed uncontrollably. Could it be that we are wrong? If so, we have offended Grandmaster. This is treason, and we will be expelled from the sect. He said just now that we did not know. He will spare us this time. If we do it again, we will be punished according to the sect rules. Chapter 1874. A moment later, the sword steel retracted its invisible pressure. The three elders heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. After the incident just now, the anger of the three elders had dissipated. Instead, they were filled with awe and doubt. After exchanging a glance with each other, Nye Tianqing rose to his feet and led the two elders toward the conference hall. In the north of the training hall, there was an ancient bronze palace that covered an area of thousands of feet. The roof of the palace was covered with golden glazed tiles. They used to be dazzling, but now they were gray and dim. This ancient bronze palace was the most majestic palace in the Pillar of Heaven mountain. It was called the Pillar of Heaven Palace. More than 1,000 years ago, the main hall was the meeting hall of the sect. The backyard was the bedroom of the founder, Kenshin. The current Pillar of Heaven Palace was no longer as sacred and majestic as it used to be. The steps and pillars in front of the main hall were also covered with mottled patterns. When the three elders entered the main hall, they saw Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai Shohei standing in the middle of the hall with respectful postures. The fourth elder Feng Ping and the fifth elder Lang Jing stood in the corner of the hall, quietly observing. Ji Tianqing stood at the head of the table, silently looking at the high platform, bronze throne, and stone wall. On the platform with a radius of 100 feet, there was a large bronze throne that had not been sat on for more than 1,000 years. That was Kenshin's exclusive throne. Ever since he left, Huanglong Daoist had not sat on it. During the meetings, Huanglong Daoist only dared to sit on the left side of the table. In his heart, his master, Kenshin, would always be supreme. At this moment, Ji Tianqing returned to the old place. Standing in front of the bronze throne, he looked up at the stone wall behind the throne and sighed with emotion. There was a painting on the stone wall. There were 2 lines of words written in bold strokes. In the painting was a young man standing alone on top of the clouds. His left hand pointed to the sky, and his right hand held a sword pointing to the ground. Although the painting was not very clear, he could still see that the godlike young man was quite similar to him. He stretched out his hand to caress the bronze throne and slowly paced around it. On the right side of the throne, there was a bronze stone platform with a dark green vine on it. Even after 1,000 years, the 3 feet-long vine still contained a boundless vitality. Its skin was still fresh, and there were even signs of sprouting. This vine was no ordinary item. It was an ancient vine that he had plucked from the longevity sea, and he named it the longevity vine. More than 1,000 years ago, when he taught his disciples, he never used the sword of burial of heaven. He always used the longevity vine instead of the holy sword to demonstrate the profound meaning of the sword art. In addition, the longevity vine had another function, and that was to punish disciples. He would use the longevity vine to punish anyone who violated the sex rules or was punished for other reasons. When the longevity vine whipped his body, the pain would seep into his bones, leaving a deep impression on him. However, it would not leave behind any scars. The power of immortality contained within could heal all kinds of injuries and pain. Not only had the Huanglong Taoist been whipped by the longevity vine, but so had the white dragon god and the chess saint, Xie Wudao. Ji Tianxing reached out and picked up the longevity vine, rubbing it with his palm. The longevity vine was also intelligent. It sensed his aura and lit up with a dense green light. In just a few breaths, 2 tiny sprouts sprouted from the dark green surface of the vine. Seeing this, the Huanglong Taoist was even more excited. His eyes shone brightly. Upon seeing this, Nie Tianchen and the 2 elders' expressions flickered drastically as they began to discuss among themselves via voice transmission. He actually picked up the longevity vine and made it sprout. Oh my God! Are our eyes playing tricks on us? This is definitely a miracle. For more than 1,000 years, no one other than the great deity could pick up the holy vine. Our Grandmaster has really shown up. The 3 of them were shocked, but they did not dare to make a sound. They walked quietly to the Huanglong Taoist and stared at Ji Tianxing with shining eyes. After a long time, Ji Tianxing stopped reminiscing and put the longevity vine back on the bronze lampstand. He swung his loose white robe and sat calmly on the bronze throne. In that instant, the dim bronze throne actually lit up with a layer of hazy green light. The hall, which was originally dark and gloomy, became as bright as day. What was more amazing was that hundreds of ancient lamps on the walls of the hall that had been extinguished for thousands of years were reignited. Above the dome of the main hall, tens of thousands of light spots lit up. There were more than 90,000 gemstones, all shining with a dense white light. They gathered to form a huge star map, as if the sky was filled with stars. The bright starlight shone down and illuminated the entire hall, making it look like a dream. Everyone felt as if they were in the starry sky, and the sun, moon, and stars were within reach. Huanglong Taoist and Ji Bai and Shohei were amazed, and their eyes were filled with excitement and worship. The 3 elders were also stunned. They looked up at the vast star map, and their hearts were filled with shock. Ji Tianxing's reaction was the calmest. He only glanced at the star map and then withdrew his gaze. After all, the star map was personally arranged by him. The structure of the star map, the order and position of the 90,000 gemstones, he knew it like the back of his hand. At this moment, he was sitting on the bronze throne, bathing in the bright starlight. His body was emitting a faint divine light, like a real god. Huanglong Taoist immediately knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. He solemnly shouted, "Welcome back to Tianzhu Mountain, Master." Ji Bai and Shohei were stunned for a moment, and quickly knelt down and shouted respectfully, "Welcome back, Grandmaster." The 3 elders were suddenly embarrassed. They stood there with complicated expressions, and were somewhat at a loss. Huanglong Taoist had already knelt down, and if the 3 of them didn't kneel, it would be rude. However, they were still observing Ji Tianxing, and were not sure if he was Kenshin. It was even more difficult for them to accept this unbelievable result. For them to kneel to a young man in his 20s and respectfully call him Grandmaster, it was too difficult. Just as the three of them were hesitating, Huanglong Daoist turned his head and stared at them with a dignified gaze. He shouted in a low voice, "Unfilial disciples, hurry up and kneel." Second elder and third elder's hearts trembled. They braced themselves and knelt down. Only great elder Nie Tianqian did not kneel. He hesitated for a moment, and then he gathered his courage and made up his mind. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a solemn expression and asked, "Young Master Ji, please forgive me for not being able to accept this result. As everyone knows, our sect's Grandmaster Kenshin fell 1,000 years ago. Now, after 1,000 years, you suddenly appeared. Even if you look similar to our Grandmaster, you can't be our sect's Grandmaster. Please give me a reasonable explanation." Second elder, third elder, Feng Ping, and Lang Jing all had the same thought. They still felt that it was a dream. Hearing Nie Tianqian's question, the four of them quickly echoed, "Yes. I hope young Master Ji can explain clearly. This kind of mysterious thing only exists in myths and legends. How can it be true?" Chapter 1875. Ji Tianxing also understood that it was almost impossible for the five elders to accept such a ridiculous thing in such a short time. However, these five elders were very important. They were the mainstays of Tianzhu Mountain. Although the Huanglong Daoist was in charge, the five elders were still in charge of all the affairs of Tianzhu Mountain. If he could not convince them, he would not be able to control the situation of Tianzhu Mountain. No matter what plan he had, it would be difficult to implement it. The Huanglong Daoist also understood this, so he was very anxious. He glared at the five elders angrily and shouted in a dignified tone, "What are you doing? Are you trying to force me to abdicate or rebel? I am Master's eldest disciple, so I know him the best. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, this old man can guarantee with his life that this person in front of you is the Sword God, the founder of our Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Master once ascended to the upper realm and became the divine king who controlled the gods. How could he have fallen? Now that Master has reincarnated and returned to Tianzhu Mountain, he will lead everyone to rise again. How dare you treat our founder like this? What are your intentions?" The Huanglong Daoist was really angry. An invisible pressure burst out from his body and suppressed the five elders. The five elders were intimidated by his dignified aura. They showed a respectful expression and lowered their heads. However, they refused to back down and swore to get to the bottom of this matter. Nie Tianqian cupped his hands and said to the Huanglong Daoist, "Great Immortal, we are also willing to believe that this young Master Ji is our founder and that he can lead everyone to glory again. But how can we believe such an unimaginable thing? You are our teacher, so we naturally don't dare to offend you. However, we just want to know the truth and the reason. Otherwise, how can we be at ease?" "You, Nie Tianqian." The Huanglong Daoist frowned and was about to reprimand him. At this moment, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted the Huanglong Daoist. "Huanglong, don't be angry. Let me handle this matter. It happened too suddenly and it's too bizarre. It's normal for them to be unable to accept it for a while." After he finished speaking, he looked at the five elders with a dignified gaze and asked in a calm tone, "Everyone, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has fallen to such a state today and is in imminent danger. For the five of you to stay and fight alongside Huanglong until now, it can be seen that you are loyal and devoted to our sect. Since that's the case, I won't hide it from you. Just as Huanglong said, I've reincarnated, so my strength is still gradually recovering. This kind of thing that only exists in myths and legends is unattainable to you, but it's nothing to me. If you want to verify my identity, it's actually very simple. All you need to do is ask about something that only Kenshin knows about, and you'll be able to answer the questions in your hearts." Upon hearing these words, Nie Tianqian and the four elders' expressions softened significantly. Nie Tianqian pondered for a moment before saying, "Young Master Ji, there's a history book in our sect that records everything from the founding of our sect to his ascension. I hope that young Master Ji will consider my next question carefully before answering." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. Nie Tianqian's expression was solemn as he asked, "Young Master Ji, may I ask when our sect's founding ancestor first arrived at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? How many people were with him at that time?" Ji Tianqing answered without hesitation, "It was 1,546 years ago. There were 4 people with him, including Huang Long." Nie Tianqian's expression did not change as he continued to ask, "When was our sect's dojo built? What's the name of the formation in the dojo? How many transformations are there? Also, there are 108 mountains within 100,000 miles of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. What kind of formation do they form?" Ji Tianqing did not hesitate at all as he said in a calm voice, 1,546 years ago, during the fall of the leaves, I came to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and decided to build a dojo here and establish a sect. In just 36 days, my 4 followers and I built 18 palaces and 36 courtyards. When it was snowing, I built the dojo on my own and laid down the heavenly dome formation that contained 99 transformations to suppress the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After that, I used the ability to change heaven and earth and moved the surrounding mountains. With the 108 mountains, I formed the Heavenly Dipper Star Formation and the Earth Fiend Spirit Praying Formation. In the spring of the next year, I challenged all the martial saints in the world. In the following 20 years, a total of 49 martial saints came to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains one after another and competed with me on the dojo. Ji Tianqing's tone was very firm and clear. It was as if he had personally experienced those scenes, and it was very vivid. Huang Long Daoist was silent as his eyes were filled with memories. Ji Bai and Shou He were shocked as they looked at Ji Tianqing with complicated expressions. Their eyes were filled with worship. The expressions of the elders also changed. They looked at each other and secretly discussed. Every word that he said matches the records in the history books without the slightest discrepancy. I'm beginning to believe that he is the reincarnation of our ancestor. If that's not the case, it doesn't make sense. There really is such a miracle in the world. Our ancestor has reincarnated and returned. The heavens are really blessing our sect. The elders all believed Ji Tianqing's words. Nie Tianqian still did not express his opinion. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a firm gaze and continued, "Our ancestor's life story is widely spread throughout the Xinwu continent, and everyone knows about it. If someone is diligent enough, they can spend a lot of time and effort investigating the clues, and they can easily answer the questions. Thus, it's not enough for Sir Ji to just answer these questions. May I ask in which year did our ancestor challenge the 4 ultimates martial saints?" Ji Tianqing expressionlessly replied, "It was in the summer of the 11th year after our sect was founded." Nie Tianqian asked again, "In the 12th year, our ancestor defeated the Flame Spirit Tribe's martial saint in 2 moves, and not long after, he defeated the Grand Spring Nation's Holy Emperor with a single sword strike. Is that correct?" "Wrong," Ji Tianqing said in a low voice. "In the 12th year, only the Flame Spirit Tribe's martial saint came to challenge us, and I defeated him in 1 move. I defeated the Grand Spring Nation's Holy Emperor in the autumn of the following year, and I did not even use my sword. Instead, I forced him to retreat with a single punch." When they heard this, the 4 elders' eyes lit up, and they were filled with joy and excitement. "This is unbelievable. He actually answered such a tricky question correctly. These matters are extremely secretive, and only our sect's history books have detailed records of them. He really is our ancestor's reincarnation." However, Nie Tianqian was not done with his questioning, and he solemnly said, "Sir Ji, you still need to answer the last and most important question. Before our ancestor ascended, he left behind the Astral Sword Manual. What kinds of techniques does it contain? Our sect is the holy land closest to the heavens, and it hides a huge secret. After our ancestor ascended, countless powers coveted our sect's shocking secret, and they all attacked and persecuted us. Sir Ji, may I ask where this shocking secret is hidden? Ji Tianxing coldly replied, the Astral Sword Manual has a total of 5 secret techniques. They are the Sword Manipulation Sutra, the 9 Swords of the Burial of Heaven, the Sky Dragon's 7 Steps, the Heavenly Spirit Body Refining Art, and the Myriad Sword Array. As for where this shocking secret is hidden, only the sect masters of each generation are qualified to know. Now, Huang Long is still the sect master of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Other than me, only he knows about it. At this point, he stared sharply at Nye Tianxin, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. He said in a cold voice, "You're only an elder of our sect, and you're not qualified to know this question. You're deliberately questioning me with this secret. If you're not stupid, then you're evil." As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful and invisible pressure burst out from his body, and it pressed down on Nye Tianxin like a mountain. Nye Tianxin's expression changed immediately, and a look of fear and trepidation appeared on his face. He quickly knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. Chapter 1876. An invisible divine power suppressed Nye Tianxin. He prostrated himself on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. The invisible pressure made him panic, as if he felt that death was approaching. His body became cold and stiff. The 4 elders standing behind him were also pale with fright. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. Unfilial disciple welcomes the return of the Grandmaster. The 5 elders knelt down, and Ji Bai and Shohei also hurriedly knelt down. That domineering and unparalleled divine power filled the hall, making the 2 of them anxious and afraid to breathe. Only Huanglong Taoist was still standing. His back was straight, his face was red, and his eyes were full of pride. He stared at Ji Tianxing, as if he was looking at his master Kenshin. His thoughts also returned to more than 1,500 years ago. Ji Tianxing sat on the bronze throne and looked down at Nye Tianxin and the others. Although the 5 elders believed him and accepted his identity, this was not the end. However, this was not the end. It was a new beginning. He stretched out his left hand, and the longevity vine on the lampstand next to the throne flew up and landed in his palm. He held the longevity vine in his hand and pointed at Nye Tianxin, who was lying on the ground, and said in a dignified tone, "Nye Tianxin, although I have just returned today and don't know the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, I still don't know the situation. However, what you have done today has crossed the line again and again, and even touched the taboo of our sect. Since this is your first offense, I will be lenient. I hope you will remember it in your heart." After saying that, he waved his left hand, and the longevity vine turned into a ray of green light and flew into Huanglong Taoist's hand. "Huanglong, carry out 20 whippings." Huanglong Taoist held the longevity vine with both hands and was stunned. "Master, are you really going to let me carry out the punishment? Aren't you going to do it yourself as a warning to others?" Huanglong Taoist knew that his master was reincarnated as Ji Tianxing. A young man in his 20s was too young. His master had just returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and the elders were not convinced. His master could use this opportunity to show his power and intimidate the elders. However, he did not expect that his master would not do it and let him carry out the punishment. Thinking of this, he could not help but think, "Master's strength is too weak now, and he is afraid that he will show his cowardice?" Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "Nye Tianxin is your disciple, of course you should discipline him. He is not qualified for me to carry out the punishment." Huang Long hurriedly nodded his head to express his understanding. He said solemnly, "I understand." With these words, He held the longevity vine with both hands and walked to Nie Tianqian's side. Suppressed by the invisible divine might, Nie Tianqian was still sprawled on the ground, unable to move. Of Taoist. Master, please have mercy and spare this disciple this time. Although his seniority was low, he was an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years. He was also the great elder of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. His status was second only to Huanglong Daoist. Now that the elders and Ji Bai Shohei were present, he had to lie on the ground and be whipped. How humiliating was that! When he thought of being whipped in public, he was so ashamed that his face turned red like fire. Huanglong Daoist did not dare to show mercy. He shouted with a dignified face, Nie Tianqian, don't blame me for not forgiving you. You are too foolish. You ignored my advice and repeatedly offended the patriarch. You must be punished. If I am biased, I will also be whipped. You can't disobey the teachings of the ancestors and forget the rules of the sect. I hope you will learn your lesson. After that, Huanglong Daoist held the longevity vine and whipped Nie Tianqian's buttocks. Slap! A crisp explosion resounded in the hall. Nie Tianqian's purple robe was torn to shreds. Blood splattered from his buttocks. He raised his head and screamed in pain. Before he could finish his screams, the second whip lashed out. Slap! Another crisp sound rang out. Nie Tianqian's flesh was torn open. His body convulsed, and his back was soaked in cold sweat. The great elder of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, an 8th-level crossing tribulation martial lord, a white-haired old man, was being whipped in public. How humiliating was that! Not only was Nie Tianqian in pain, but he was also humiliated. He wanted to kill himself. Unfortunately, he was being punished in the hall by Huanglong Daoist. No matter how much pain and humiliation he felt, he could only grit his teeth and endure it. He did not dare to scream anymore. Instead, he kept groaning in pain. The 4 elders were the closest to Nie Tianqian. Seeing Nie Tianqian being tortured with their own eyes, their faces turned ghastly pale, and they fell silent out of fear. Before long, the 20 whips were over. The invisible divine might that was suppressing Nie Tianqian had dissipated. However, he had lost consciousness from the pain. He lay on the ground like a clay figurine, unable to get up. His back and buttocks were already badly mutilated. It was a horrible sight. The pain that went deep into his bones was etched in his heart. He did not want to experience it again in his life. However, miraculously, the messy wounds on his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Huanglong Daoist held the longevity vine with both hands and walked to the bottom of the dais respectfully. He reported, "Master, I've finished the punishment." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. With a wave of his sleeve, the longevity vine flew back to the lampstand and landed on the ground. "All right, you may all rise." As soon as he said those words, the murderous aura in the hall was swept away. Everyone felt relieved. They heaved a sigh of relief and quickly stood up. Nie Tianqian was in the most pain. He struggled to stand up and grimaced in pain. However, he did not dare to make a sound. Ji Tianqing looked at the Huanglong Daoist and asked, "When I returned to the mountain just now, I saw that the spiritual qi at the foot of the mountain was gone. The river had dried up, and the mountain peak was also in decline. Even the disciples were not as prosperous as they used to be. There were only 100 or 200 of them left. Huanglong, tell me, what has happened in the past 1,000 years?" At the mention of these things, the Huanglong Daoist's face was full of self-blame. He quickly bowed and said, "I was incompetent. I failed to protect Master's orthodoxy and let the Tianzhu mountain wither. Since Master ascended, too many changes and disasters have happened in the past 1,000 years. Our sect was on the verge of destruction 9 times. The twists and turns and the hardships we went through could not be finished even if I talked for 3 days and 3 nights. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Then make it short. Just report the result." The Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and said, since Master left, our sect has been known as the #1 sect in the world. A tall tree attracts the wind. We have been persecuted and suppressed by countless forces and countries. Chapter 1877. The Huanglong Taoist narrated his experiences over the past 1,000 years in a sorrowful and indignant tone. Ji Tianxing reclined on the bronze throne, quietly listening to the conversation. However, no one knew that he had been secretly observing Nye Tianxin from the corner of his eyes, observing his reaction. However, Nye Tianxin's expression was calm, and his behavior was very normal. The Huanglong Taoist spoke for a while and roughly described the 9 crises that had almost destroyed the sect. Master, after those 9 calamities, our sect has already declined and withered away, dispirited and listless. Most of the 3,000 disciples back then had died in battle or quietly fled the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In recent years, the sect has only about 230 people left. Among them, there are more than 50 odd workers and 160 disciples. Ji Tianxing frowned and said in a low voice, "The number of disciples in the sect is so small that it can't even compare to ordinary second-rate sections. By the way, in the past 1,000 years you have been fighting with various forces. Have you investigated their backgrounds?" The Huanglong Taoist thought for a while and replied, "In the past 1,000 years, there have been thousands of forces that have openly and secretly attacked the sect. The disciples divided those forces into 3 classes. The lowest class was the weakest. They were usually instigated by others or blinded by greed. These forces are not a concern. They are all a motley crew. I can't even remember their origins and names. The stronger first-rate forces are all empires or top sections. They all have martial saints and a large number of tribulation-passing experts. They are either defeated by the forces of your martial saints or want to occupy the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and snatch the secret manuals of martial arts. These forces are very difficult to deal with. If we are not careful, we will be heavily injured and our vitality will be greatly damaged. The truly terrifying ones are the 2 super forces hidden in the dark. One of them is the ghost clan of the North Underworld Mountain. The other force is a powerful divine nation." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. It is understandable that the demon clan of the North Underworld Mountain wants to attack the sect. 1,000 years ago, I helped the Luo Shui martial god to kill his way into the North Underworld Mountain. He destroyed 96 tribes and slaughtered millions of demons. 4 great devil saints besieged me, and 3 of them were heavily injured by me. They hate me to the core. Naturally, they will take revenge on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains after I ascend. But who is the hidden force of the divine nation that you mentioned?" Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment and muttered to himself, "The Luo River God Nation has the closest relationship with me, and they don't even have time to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, let alone deal with it. As for the Taihao Divine Kingdom, Martial God Taihao owes me a favor and treats me with great respect. He was not a sinister and despicable person, so it was impossible for him to deal with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Now that I think about it, only martial god Tian Ju had a cold and arrogant attitude, and had some animosity with me." Huanglong Taoist nodded and said, "That's right. The situation is just as Master said. The disciples had clashed with that force countless times and investigated for over 100 years. Finally, they found evidence that could be used against them and their identities. It was the people from the Heaven Extinction God Nation. Furthermore, they might have been ordered by martial god Tianju. As for the Luo River God Nation, they have secretly helped us in the past 1,000 years and resolved many dangers and difficulties. If not for the Luo River God Nation's secret help, I'm afraid our sect would not have survived until today." Ji Tianxing listened calmly and thought to himself, "I have not repaid the favor I owed Luo River. Now that I owe even more, I can't repay it." He looked at the Huanglong Taoist with a burning gaze and asked in a solemn tone, "Other than the Heaven Extinction God Nation and the North Underworld Mountain, which other forces are persecuting our sect. The two arrays that I set up back then have already been destroyed, causing the pillar of heaven's mountains to lack spiritual chi. To be able to see through the 108 mountain arrays, one has to be at least a martial sage. And to be able to destroy the two arrays, one has to be a martial god. Huanglong Daoist hesitated for a moment before replying angrily, with the two strong enemies, the Heaven Extinction God Nation and the North Underworld Mountain, our sect is already in imminent danger. But in our current situation, not only do we have external troubles, we also have internal troubles. Back then, when Master was in charge of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, all the sects in the world came to pay their respects and countless geniuses were honored to join our sect. Around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, within 100 million-mile radius, all the villages, towns, cities and sects have all submitted to our sect. But now, out of the 9 sects and 18 factions that submitted to us, more than half of them have become disloyal. Out of the 300 cities, tens of thousands of villages and tribes that submitted to us, more than half of them have left our sect's jurisdiction. They have either established their own sects or submitted to other sects. After hearing these words, Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a cold smile. He, as expected. Back then, when our sect was strong and powerful, hundreds of cities submitted to us for protection. The 9 sects and 18 factions also submitted to us and regarded themselves as our subjects. Now that our sect has declined, the various forces have also rebelled. No wonder the 2 arrays were destroyed and the spiritual chi of heavens and earth dried up. After muttering a few words to himself, he continued, Huanglong, what other bad news do you have? Tell me all at once. Huanglong Daoist looked at him deeply, his heart filled with self-blame and shame. Obviously, Ji Tianqing was already mentally prepared and prepared for the worst. Thus, Huanglong Daoist continued to report the news. A few months ago, a large number of ghost clan powerhouses from the North Underworld Mountain used crafty schemes and sneaked into our sect to start a massacre. In that battle, the disciples and a few elders were injured. The 6th and 7th elders also died in battle. There were also a few deacons, more than 50 disciples, and more than 30 guards who were all killed by the ghost clan powerhouses. Our sect originally had more than 200 people, but only a little more than 180 people are left. Now that our sect's defense is empty, we are in imminent danger. Unfortunately, when the 9 sects and 18 factions heard the news, they took the opportunity to rebel. Only the 2 sects and the 4 factions still remember their old friendship and belong to our sect in name, but they will not lend a hand. The other 7 sects and 14 factions are divided into 2 groups. They are planning to attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, seize the training grounds, and seize Master's inheritance. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's aura became even colder, and his eyes were filled with dense killing intent. They are really treacherous and despicable people who forget their ancestors. Back then, they took the initiative to climb the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and came to beg me to take them under the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I made an agreement with the leaders of the 9 sects and 18 factions to protect them and teach them the profoundness of martial arts. Now, they want to join forces to destroy the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and seize my martial arts inheritance? Huanglong, what are the sects in those 2 groups? Huanglong Daoist said with resentment. In the east, the Water Mirror sect, the Battle Dragon sect, and the Seeking Heaven sect colluded and gathered the 6 great sects with the Battle Dragon sect as the leader. Chapter 1878. 1,000 years ago, before the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was established, the situation within 100 million miles was very chaotic. This area was located between the North Underworld Mountain, the Luoshui Kingdom, and the Ruins of God. It could be said to be a dangerous place. However, this area was very vast and had a radius of 100 million miles. There were more than 20 sects, hundreds of cities, and tens of thousands of villages and villages. Between the sects and cities, because of various grievances and conflicts of interest, there had always been endless killing. It was only until the Kenshin took over the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and established the sect that the chaos that had lasted for thousands of years ended. At that time, the 9 sects and 18 schools, as well as the hundreds of cities, were all frightened by the might of the Kenshin and fought to submit to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains in order to obtain protection and help. The Kenshin was obsessed with martial arts and had no intention of fighting for hegemony, so he accepted the 9 sects, 18 schools, and many cities. He even picked out more than 20 spiritual veins from the 108 mountain peaks around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and gave them to the 9 sects and 18 schools to be their mountain gate. In his opinion, as long as the Pillar of Heaven's mountains existed, it would be a good deed to maintain peace within 100 million miles. However, he never expected that 1,000 years later, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would wither to this extent, and most of the 9 sects and 18 schools would rebel. When this matter was brought up, everyone was filled with indignation and hatred towards the 9 sects and 18 schools' actions. Compared to the hostility and persecution of the various forces, the betrayal of the former officials was more hateful. The main hall fell into silence, and the atmosphere was rather oppressive. Ji Tianxing finally understood why the Huanglong Taoist sent him a letter to return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the eyes of the Huanglong Taoist, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would not be able to escape this calamity. When the 9 sects and 18 schools attacked, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would definitely fall, and countless disciples would be killed. The lucky survivors would all escape from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and the former number 1 sect would disappear. Therefore, before the sect was destroyed, the Huanglong Taoist had to summon the successor of the Kenshin and make arrangements for his death. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing said in a firm and dignified tone, "After more than 1,000 years of suffering and wind and rain, it is not easy for everyone to hold on until today. Although the situation is perilous, everyone should not be pessimistic. As the overseer of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, I will definitely punish the evildoers, purge the evildoers, and restore the prestige of the sect." Huanglong Taoist hurriedly nodded and said with a heavy heart, "Master, don't worry. Huanglong swears to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains with my life. I swear to live and die with the sect." Nie Tianxin and the other 4 elders also expressed their determination in serious tones. "Grandmaster, please rest assured. We swear to live and die with the sect." Ji Tianxing nodded with satisfaction and warned, "Today's matter must be kept strictly confidential. Especially my identity, you must not reveal it. From now on, in front of outsiders, I am a disciple of Kenshin." Huanglong Taoist and the other elders understood that his identity must be kept a secret. If the news were to leak out and outsiders knew that he was Kenshin's reincarnation, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. At that time, it would definitely bring disaster to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even he might be killed. After the meeting ended, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and dismissed the other elders. He brought Ji Bai and Shohei out of the main hall and entered the Pillar of Heaven's palace behind the main hall. The Pillar of Heaven's palace in the backyard was the place where he lived and cultivated in the past. After thousands of years, when he entered the Pillar of Heaven's palace, everything was still the same. The layout of the pavilions and corridors had not changed at all. Only the flowers and plants in the courtyard had been changed over and over again. Usually, the disciples and odd-job workers of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would come to clean the place once every few days. The windows in the palace were clean and the floor and pillars were spotless. Ji Tianxing walked through the corridors and entered the depths of the palace. He came to a dark brown secret room. The door of this secret room was 10 feet high and 3 feet wide. The 2 bronze doors were full of majestic vicissitudes of life and exuded a heavy and majestic aura. The left door was carved with a sacred beast, water qilin, and the right door was carved with a divine bird, fire phoenix. The 2 words sword pavilion were carved on the rock wall above the door. This was the secret room where Kenshin went into seclusion. Ever since Kenshin left that year, this secret room had been permanently sealed, and no one had opened it again. Ji Tianxing stood in front of the door of the secret room. His eyes stared at the qilin and phoenix patterns. He slowly reached out his palms and pressed them on the bronze door knocker. Majestic and mighty golden mana surged out from his palms and poured into the bronze door. Suddenly, the dark green bronze door lit up with thousands of golden lines and emitted a dazzling golden light. The water qilin and fire phoenix patterns also seemed to come alive. They raised their heads and shouted, spreading their wings and emitting a divine domineering aura that looked down on the world. Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai and Shohei stood behind Ji Tianxing. They felt the ancient and vast domineering aura. Their hearts surged and they felt a strong sense of reverence. After 10 breaths, the 2 bronze doors slowly opened, emitting a dull creaking sound. Wisps of dust fell from the lintel and door frame. Under the golden light, they danced like thousands of golden light spots. Ji Tianxing stepped into the secret room first. Huanglong Daoist followed closely behind. Ji Bai and Shohei stood guard outside the door. The secret room was pitch black. When Ji Tianxing took 7 steps, the surrounding walls and the dome above suddenly lit up with gemstone lamp. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hundreds of bright lamps bloomed with colorful spiritual light, immediately illuminating the secret room as if it was daytime. The secret room had a radius of 100 feet. The floor was square and the dome was round. It was in accordance with the profound meaning of the circle of heaven and earth. The floor was paved with light green spiritual jade. It was engraved with mysterious and complex array patterns, as mysterious as the meridians of the human body. 36,000 gemstones were inlaid on the dome. They shone with cold silver light, forming a star chart. Under the north wall of the secret room, there was a spacious purple jade throne. On the wall behind the throne, there were hundreds of lines of seal script, recording several swordsmanship heart sutras. There was also a secret door on the wall leading to the secret room on the next floor. Ji Tianxing walked to the purple jade throne, waved his hand to wipe away the fine dust, and sat down. Huanglong Daoist stood respectfully, waiting for Ji Tianxing's orders. He knew very well that Ji Tianxing did not bring him here just to reminisce about the old days. Sure enough, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out a golden light, closing the door of the secret room. Only the 2 of them were left in the secret room, falling into silence. Ji Tianxing said, "Now that our sect is facing internal and external troubles, we must use thunderous means to contain them. Great Elder Nye Tianxin, have you investigated carefully? Is this person reliable?" Huanglong Daoist said with a serious face, "I understand what you mean, Master. In the past, I also suspected that there was a mole in our sect who cooperated with the enemy forces. However, I have secretly investigated for more than 30 years and only found one mole, a deacon of our sect. As for Nye Tianxin, he is my eldest disciple. He has been following me for more than 300 years. So far, I have not found anything unusual." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, "What if he is a mole carefully cultivated by the Heaven End Divine Nation and deliberately planted by them? In order to solve the mystery of ascension, it is possible for him to hide for hundreds of years." Chapter 1879. Since ancient times, the world had been isolated, and no one had been able to ascend. Countless peerless martial gods had been trapped in the Shenwu continent, and they could only live with regret for the rest of their lives. More than 1,000 years ago, Kenshin had appeared out of nowhere and swept across the continent with his most dazzling and invincible form, ascending to the higher realms. When he became the first person to ascend in 30,000 years, all the powerhouses on the Shenwu continent believed that Tianzhu Mountain hid the mystery of ascension. As long as they could attack Tianzhu Mountain and obtain the mystery of ascension, they would be able to break the legend of the world's isolation and ascend to the higher realms like Kenshin. Not only were the martial gods tempted, but many of the martial saints on the continent were also eager to obtain the mystery of ascension. This was why Tianzhu Mountain had been besieged by various powers, and it had declined to its current state. However, only Huanglong Daoist knew that there was no such mystery of ascension at Tianzhu Mountain. Currently, there were only a few precious treasures on Tianzhu Mountain. Kenshin had left behind the Astral Sword Manual, the Firmament Array, the Divine Astral Furnace, and the Longevity Vine. Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and said to Ji Tianqing, "Master, please do not worry. I will double my vigilance and secretly monitor Nie Tianqin's movements." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. "This is only my guess. I cannot confirm whether or not he is a spy from the Heaven and Divine Nation. However, I have already set up a trap, and the answer will be revealed soon." "What trap?" Huanglong Daoist asked curiously. A meaningful smile appeared on Ji Tianqing's face as he explained, "Currently, only a few people know about my identity. Furthermore, I intentionally ordered everyone to keep it a secret. However, this news is too shocking, and it can even cause a huge commotion on the Shenwu continent. It can even cause chaos in the Three Divine Nations and Dark North Mountain. If Nie Tianqin is a spy from the Heaven and Divine Nation, then he would rather expose his identity and spread this news." Huanglong Daoist suddenly understood, and his eyes lit up. "That's right. If he is a spy, then his goal is to obtain the mystery of ascension. Now that you have reincarnated and returned, the Heaven Extinction God Nation only needs to capture you to obtain the mystery of ascension. Master, if that's really the case, then aren't you in an extremely dangerous situation?" Huanglong's expression changed, and a worried look appeared on his face. "No. I'll capture Nie Tianqin now and imprison him. Regardless of whether he is a spy or not, we would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. We can't let Master take the risk." With that, he turned to leave. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said sternly, "Wait." For the time being, they didn't want to make a move on Nie Tianqin. They just needed to keep an eye on him so that they wouldn't alert him. "Moreover, I have already made plans and arrangements. If he's really a spy, it's within my expectations that he would announce my identity." Huanglong Daoist was even more puzzled. He asked, "But Master, once your identity is exposed, it will bring endless danger and trouble." Ji Tianqing shook his head gently and said, "The Pillar of Heaven's mountains has already withered to such a state. We must use thunderous means to save it. It's time to rise from the ashes. As long as we stir up the storm, the big fish under the water will emerge. And our Pillar of Heaven's mountains will be the small boat fighting the storm." Huanglong Daoist vaguely understood his meaning. After a moment of silence, he nodded solemnly and said, "Disciple will follow Master's orders." Ji Tianqing ordered again, "There's no time to lose. Let's start executing the plan now. Before the 7 sects and 14 forces send out the attack, we must complete the deployment. Huanglong, you personally lead a few elders to check the protective array. I will personally activate the firmament array. In addition, I have brought a large number of healing pills and cultivation resources. Later, you will distribute them to the disciples and ask them to heal as soon as possible. Also, the most important thing is to send a message to the 2 sects and 4 forces in your name. Ask them to come to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for a meeting." Huanglong Daoist was startled for a moment and said with some hesitation, "Master, you want to summon the people of the 2 sects and 4 forces? Right now, they are still under the Pillar of Heaven's mountains in name and have not rebelled with the other sections. This is already the most they can do. Even if I send a message to summon them for a meeting, they will definitely not dare to come. They will definitely find all kinds of excuses to evade." Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, "If that's the case, then I will personally go and meet the people of those sections." Huanglong Daoist could not help but ask, "Master, why are you going to meet them at this time?" Of course, to help them stabilize the morale of their troops and let them swear loyalty to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Ji Tianxing answered without hesitation. This. Huanglong Daoist frowned with a strange expression. He thought to himself, the situation has already developed to this point. Zhan Long, Martial Saint, and Niwia are so aggressive. How can the two sects and four forces still be loyal to us? He almost saw no hope and was somewhat pessimistic. Master has been away for more than 1,000 years and does not understand the current situation. He is destined to return empty-handed, sigh. Huanglong Daoist sighed in his heart, but he did not dare to go against Ji Tianxing's will and could only nod in agreement. Since Master wants to inspect the situation of the two sects and four forces, of course, I will accompany you. Tomorrow morning, I will take you there. Then, Huanglong Daoist left the secret room and went to gather the elders and deacons to issue a series of orders. Ji Tianxing also left the throne and walked to the stone wall behind it. He waved his hand and made a series of hand seals to open the secret door on the wall. Creak, creak, creak. After the secret door opened, a dark passage appeared. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out a golden light into the passage. The passage suddenly lit up with bright lights and extended downward. Ji Tianxing stepped into the passage and fell downwards. His figure was drowned by the dazzling light. The passage was narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. It extended downwards and was at least 10,000 feet high. When he occupied the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he opened up this passage in the secret room. It ran through the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains and extended deep underground. No one knew that under the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there was an unprecedented divine formation called the Stellar Divine Furnace. The 108 mountains within a radius of 100,000 miles formed the Big Dipper Starnet Array and the Earth Fiend Spirit Praying Array. When these two super arrays were activated, they would gather endless divine power of heaven and earth and pour it into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The heavenly dome array of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would gather the power of the stars and pour it into the stellar divine furnace together with the divine power of heaven and earth. As long as these three arrays did not stop operating, the stellar divine furnace would never be extinguished. Back then, Kenshin cultivated in the stellar divine furnace to temper his body and create the stellar body refinement art. Everyone thought that Kenshin was cultivating in seclusion in the secret room, but he was actually cultivating in the stellar divine furnace. The stellar divine furnace had a powerful and miraculous effect. It was not only beneficial to martial sages but also to martial gods. Chapter 1880. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing passed through a hazy light and landed at the bottom of the tunnel. He was already 1,000 feet deep underground. The surroundings were extremely spacious, like a cave with a radius of 100 miles. Of course, this cave was still inside the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the dark sky, there were specks of fire floating in the faint silver light, like moonlight. Ji Tianxing stood in midair and looked down at the open space below him. He saw that the open space within a radius of 100 miles was densely covered with silver veins, as dense as a fishing net. Every meridian was an array pattern that extended in all directions, all the way to the edge of the empty space. In the middle of the open space, there was a tall platform that looked like a torch. In the huge torch, there was a silver flame that was more than 10 feet tall, very conspicuous in the darkness. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes dimmed. He muttered to himself, back then, the stellar divine cauldron was operating at full power, and the stellar divine fire filled the entire cauldron. Now there is only a weak flame left. It seems that the two heaven-earth divine arrays have been completely destroyed. As he spoke, he stepped across the sky and landed on the tall torch. The star divine fire, which was more than 3 meters tall, immediately enveloped his body and enveloped him. His clothes and hair were instantly burned to ashes. His strong and perfect body was immediately exposed to be burned and refined by the stellar divine fire. His skin and flesh were sparkling and translucent like spirit jade, and they were covered in a layer of hazy golden light. Before this, his body had been refined by the heavenly thunder and the stellar divine fire. Previously, he had also used the tribulations of wind and fire to refine his body, so his body had already reached an extremely powerful level. Even so, under the refinement of the stellar divine fire, his body was still distorted and deformed, constantly cracking and being reborn. Fortunately, the stellar divine fire is 100 times weaker, so I can withstand it with my current strength. If it was like back then, even a martial sage would be burned to ashes, and I wouldn't be able to refine my body. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself and started to use the stellar body refining art, absorbing the stellar divine fire to refine his body. As time went by, his physical body was refined and strengthened. His qi was increasing exponentially as well. If a martial artist's physical body was compared to a water bucket, then his transcendence energy and spiritual energy would be water. The bigger the bucket, the more water it could hold. The bodies of ordinary tribulation stage powerhouses were like buckets. Ji Tianqing's physical body had been strengthened to the peak of the tribulation stage. It was like a big water tank that could hold 20 times more water. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. It was the morning of the second day. After a night of tempering, Ji Tianqing's physical body had reached the peak of the cross-calamity realm, and he was now a half-step to martial sage. His skin had recovered completely. It was sparkling and translucent like jade. Not only was it shining with a faint golden light, it was also mixed with a trace of silver starlight. Even his long hair had regrown and hung loosely behind his head. As for his dermic powers and spiritual energy, they had also increased by about 5 times. He stopped cultivating and stepped away from the high platform. Shwa! With a flash of light in his palm, a set of clothes flew out from the space ring and covered his body. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to his previous appearance, but his aura was even stronger. The third heavenly tribulation is probably coming soon. A playful smile appeared on his face as he flew into the sky and flew toward the exit. After 100 breaths, he walked out of the secret chamber. Ji Bai and Shohei, who had been guarding the door of the secret chamber, hurriedly greeted him. "Greetings, Grandmaster." "Grandmaster, the great immortal is waiting for you outside the hall." Ji Tianqing nodded and led the two of them out of the Pillar of Heaven Palace. Outside the meeting hall, the Huanglong Taoist in an apricot yellow robe was waiting patiently. Seeing Ji Tianqing come out, he hurriedly greeted him. "Greetings, Master." Ji Tianqing raised his hand to indicate that he was excused and looked around. He saw that many disciples were busy in the palaces and courtyards around the training hall. Some were cleaning the palaces and courtyards, while others were inspecting and repairing the formation. "Let's go." Ji Tianqing brought Huanglong, Ji Bai, and Shohei to the center of the training hall. The sword steel in the middle of the training hall was still surrounded by spiritual energy, faintly emitting a majestic aura that looked down on the world. Ji Tianqing came near the sword steel and asked with his mind, "Burial of Heaven, aren't you going out with me to take a look?" The voice of Burial of Heaven sounded in his mind and replied, "No need, I will stay in the sword steel to recuperate. It will be faster to recover my vitality, and at the same time, I can guard the Pillar of Heaven mountain." "That's good too." Ji Tianqing did not say anything else and waved his hand to summon the black dragon. With a dragon roar that shook the clouds, a black dragon that was 10,000 feet long appeared out of thin air. Huanglong's eyes widened as he exclaimed in disbelief, "Dragon! Divine dragon! Master! Could it be that junior brother White Dragon has returned?" As he was too shocked, he did not see the black dragon's appearance clearly. After he exclaimed, he realized that something was wrong and muttered with a strange expression, "That's not right. Isn't junior brother White Dragon white? Why did he turn black after reincarnation?" Ji Tianqing glanced at him with a strange expression. He held back his laughter and explained, "This is not White Dragon, this is Master's new companion, Black Dragon." Oh! Huang Long came to a realization and smiled embarrassedly. Disciple forgot himself. "Master, please don't blame me." Ji Tianxing also revealed a smile and comforted, "But don't worry, maybe in a few years, you will be able to see little White Dragon again." Really? Huang Long Daoist was shocked and asked, "But according to the rumors on the continent, junior brother White Dragon has already died in battle." Ji Tianxing only smiled and did not explain further. Then, Black Dragon carried everyone into the sky and rushed to the east as fast as lightning. About 4 hours later, Black Dragon flew more than 30,000 miles. It stopped in the sky above a giant mountain that was 30,000 feet high. This giant mountain covered an area of 300 miles. The bottom of the mountain was surrounded by green mountains and rivers. The mountain walls were steep and half of the mountain was covered by clouds. On the top of the mountain, there was an open space with a radius of 100 miles. More than 10 palaces and houses were built on it, which could accommodate thousands of people and allow them to cultivate. Obviously, this giant mountain was one of the 108 mountain peaks. It was also a place with a spiritual vein. When the 9 sects and 18 factions came to pledge their allegiance, Kenshin gave this mountain peak to Guiyuan sect. Guiyuan sect was in decline at that time and was about to become a second-rate sect. It was with the protection of Tianzhu Mountain that Guiyuan sect regained its vitality and continued to exist until today. Huang Long Daoist stood beside Ji Tianxing and pointed to the palace at the top of the mountain. He introduced, "Master, Guiyuan sect's sect leader Zhao Guiyuan has already given up his position. He has been promoted to Grand Elder and has been cultivating in seclusion all year round, wanting to break through to the martial saint realm." Chapter 1881. Since Zhao Guiyuan is still alive, then things will be easier. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows as a light flashed across his eyes. Under his command, the Black Dragon descended from the sky towards the peak of the mountain. When it was 100 feet away from the peak of the mountain protection array of the Guiyuan sect was activated and a thick 5-colored light shield lit up. The Black Dragon crashed into the 5-colored light shield and made a loud sound. Layers of ripples appeared on the half-meter thick light barrier, but it did not break. The Huanglong Daoist took a step forward and was about to shout out his identity and purpose. However, Ji Tianxing waved his hand to stop him. His eyes turned into 2 golden flames as he activated his God's Eye technique and stared at the 5-colored light shield in front of him. Suddenly, the scene in front of him changed. The 5-colored light shield turned into a dense array. It's been 1,000 years. Zhao Guiyuan really did not improve. This mountain protection array is still the 10 directions origin array that I set up back then. As he spoke, Ji Tianxing raised his palms and shot out rays of spiritual light into the 5-colored light shield. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, a door opened in the 5-colored light shield. The Black Dragon carried everyone through the 5-colored light door and entered the Guiyuan sect. The layout of the Guiyuan sect was different from the circular layout of the Tianzhu Mountain. Behind the mountain gate was a square with a radius of 10,000 feet. The Guiyuan Hall was to the north of the square. Further back, there were more than 10 palaces and mansions that were distributed in a triangular shape. When the Black Dragon arrived at the peak of the Guiyuan Mountain, it was discovered by a group of patrolling guards. This was the first time the group of guards saw the Dragon God. They were all shocked and dumbfounded. When the Black Dragon landed on the square, the group of guards woke up from their daze and rushed over to stop it. "Who are you? How dare you trespass on our mountain gate? How should you be punished?" 9 guards rushed to the middle of the square and surrounded the Black Dragon with swords and knives in their hands. However, the Huanglong Daoist took a step forward and shouted with a dignified expression, "The Huanglong Daoist from Tianzhu Mountain has come to visit. Sect Leader Qin, please come out to meet us." The faces of the 9 guards changed. After recognizing the Huanglong Taoist, they hurriedly bowed. Greetings, great immortal yellow dragon. To think that the great immortal has come to visit. We have offended the great immortal, please forgive us. Great immortal, please wait for a moment. I will go and report the news. The two quick-witted guards quickly left the plaza and went to Guiyuan Palace to report the news. Not long after, a burly middle-aged man in a golden robe walked out of the hall. This person looked to be in his 40s. His face was resolute, and he exuded the dignity of a sect master. Behind him were two purple-robed elders. The middle-aged man came to the square and saw the black dragon at a glance. He immediately stopped in his tracks and widened his eyes in shock. Divine dragon? How did the yellow dragon great deity get a black dragon as a mount? Could it be that the Tianzhu mountain is in a critical situation and the yellow dragon great deity has invited strong reinforcements? After being stunned for a moment, he suppressed the shock in his heart and went forward with the two elders. Junior Qin Shan greets the yellow dragon great deity. May I know why the great immortal has suddenly come to our sect? Qin Shan and the two elders bowed respectfully to Li Mu. The Huanglong Taoist said with a dignified expression, "This is not the place to talk." Qin Shan immediately understood. He extended his hand and made a pleased gesture, leading everyone to Guiyuan Palace. Ji Tianxing kept the black dragon and brought the Huanglong Taoist and Ji Bai, Shohei, into the dignified and bright meeting hall. After entering the hall, everyone took their seats. Qin Shan sat on the sect leader's throne. Ji Tianxing sat on the left side of the seat of honor. The Huanglong Taoist sat beside him. Ji Bai and Shohei stood solemnly behind Ji Tianxing. They did not speak like two statues. Qin Shan observed and saw that the Huanglong Taoist was very respectful to Ji Tianxing. He could not help but feel puzzled. With the yellow dragon great deity's strength and status, why is he so respectful to this person? This should not be. Could it be that this person is the master of the black dragon, the strong reinforcements invited by Tianzhu Mountain? Thinking of this, Qin Shan secretly sized up Ji Tianxing. He felt that something was not right. At this time, the Huanglong Taoist opened his mouth and said, "Qin Shan, I have something important to discuss with you today. I would like to ask these two elders to leave for now." Qin Shan's expression suddenly froze. He smiled and said, "Great deity must be joking. These two elders are the pillars of our sect. They are definitely trustworthy people. If the great deity has any instructions, please tell them directly." He already knew that Tianzhu Mountain was in imminent danger. Soon, it would be destroyed by the major sections. The Yellow Dragon Great Deity's sudden visit to Guiyuan sect was definitely not a good thing. He was most likely here to ask for help. Therefore, he could only remain polite on the surface. If they were to talk about serious matters, he would definitely not listen to them. The Huanglong Taoist frowned unhappily. He temporarily suppressed his anger and turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing, who was beside him. He wanted to ask for Ji Tianxing's opinion with his eyes. Ji Tianxing raised his hand slightly and knocked on the armrest of his chair with his knuckles. The Huanglong Taoist immediately understood. He shot out two spiritual shock waves and attacked the two purple-robed elders. Bang bang! Two muffled sounds were heard from the spiritual shock wave. The two purple-robed elders immediately fell into a coma and lost their consciousness. Plop plop, the two of them fell down at the same time. They lay in the main hall and no longer made a sound. Qin Shan's expression suddenly changed. He stood up and stared angrily at the Huanglong Taoist. "Huang Dragon Great Deity, what are you doing?" The Huanglong Taoist ignored him. He waved his hand and used a secret technique. He created a protective shield with a radius of 1,000 feet and covered the entire meeting hall. All the sounds and movements in the main hall would not be heard outside. Ji Tianxing then raised his eyelids and looked coldly at Qin Shan. He said sternly, "What I am about to say is related to the survival of Guiyuan sect. The fewer people who know about it, the better. Years ago, Guiyuan sect was almost destroyed. If not for Tianzhu Mountain's protection and rescue, it would have been destroyed. When Zhao Guiyuan knelt in front of me and kowtowed to me, he swore that he would always be loyal to Tianzhu Mountain. I did not expect that after more than 1,000 years, when Tianzhu Mountain was in danger, Guiyuan sect would be so ungrateful. Since this is the case, I have no choice but to take back my righteousness personally. Ji Tianxing's expression was indifferent. His tone was calm, but he was not angry. Qin Shan was instantly stunned. He stared at Ling Yun with a face full of shock and confusion. You? Who are you? How dare you call the great elder of our sect by his name? Hearing this, the Huanglong Taoist laughed and said with disdain, Qin Shan, my teacher called Zhao Guiyuan by his name. Back then, when Zhao Guiyuan knelt in front of my teacher, he did not even have the right to clean his shoes. What? Qin Shan's eyes widened again. He was shocked and angry. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said with a face full of disdain, with your determination and wisdom, how can you be in charge of Guiyuan sect? I think Guiyuan sect is not far from being destroyed. My time is limited. I don't want to waste my breath on a junior like you. Go and ask Zhao Guiyuan to come out.